Taylor, social media is so funny because, you know, 99.9% of the time, the people that are not your Adam Schefters or your Ian Rappaports, your Mike Garfolos, they're full of shit, right?
Yeah.
But every once in a while, that 0.1% of the time, you've got, Katy Perry's booty hole
Yeah.
breaking Jeff
Yep.
Samardzija to the White Sox, or you've got a modern day hero, Pretty Ricky.
Man, Pretty Ricky has been on fire. I'm dying to know what the story behind this guy is. And for those of you out there that haven't heard the name, you must
I'm
not
sure
be
he'll
on
never
Twitter.
reveal it.
He is a guy that has been breaking free agency news at a historic clip. I mean, he has almost every deal, many hours, multiple hours before the real news breaks. And I don't know how it works in the biz. I don't know if, as the players are getting ready to sign the deals, if their team, their agents, whoever it is that's made this news to Pretty Ricky. But this guy is plugged in not only to one guy or one team. It'd be one thing if he was breaking all the Jets news and everyone's like, "Oh, he must be,
Sure.
like he's got to be with an agency or with the
Yes.
league, I would think, right? Like someone that has access to all the transactions because dude's just hitting homer after homer.
If I had more time, I would have gone in to look at specifically like the agents that are representing the guys that he's been breaking news, like if it's all one or two agencies, right? Because I had that same thought that it has to be, somebody with an agency that's just like, I don't know, like it's like it's not the Katz brothers because they only have one major
Yeah.
client, but like
Yeah, right.
Drew Rosenhaus. It's like Drew Rosenhaus's disgruntled intern or somebody like that that's like, I'm just gonna usurp Adam, I'm gonna usurp
Yeah.
Drew, and I'm just gonna break every single one of these signings like an hour or two before they do it with the terms with everything. I'm going to
Yeah.
leak it out.
He's been nailing amounts. He's been nailing dollar amounts. He said Calvin Ridley was going to go to an AFC South rival of the Jags for 90 plus million dollars at the last second. And then like 2 hours later, that news breaks. He had Darnell Mooney going to the Falcons for the exact
Yeah,
three
for
for
339,
39.
right?
I mean, and it's been really impressive and it's made for some funny, just kind of inside baseball look at like how this stuff actually works because I'm really surprised that this is kind of the first exposure, at least that I'm aware of, that we've had to a jabroni breaking major NFL news for a whole offseason. You would
Yeah,
think that these agencies would have multiple guys every year in this type of position where they
sure.
would just say like, oh, okay, just create a burner. No one's in here is going to know it's me because 8 of us were on this email chain. And
Right.
like, yeah, I just don't know how it all works, but I sure love Pretty Ricky. And he was an instant follow for me.
What's so fascinating about it to me is like when he got the first one, right? And, the Darnell Mooney one was the first one that I saw that he got, and he got it, about 20, 25 minutes before, and he had the exact, 339. He had that exactly right. He had the team, the player, the exact contract amount. And I thought, that's pretty impressive. But, this could be a Darnell Mooney burner account, and,
Sure.
let's see where it goes, right? Because the thing about your Schefters, your rap sheets is that if they tweet it, it's happened. Like it's
Yes.
it's
They
100%
don't miss.
confirmed.
Yeah.
They never ever miss. And a lot
Yep.
of times, you'll run into one of these jabroni fake insiders that will make a prediction, and boy, you'd have to get crazy lucky to get the exact contract right, 20 minutes before the guy signs. But still, I was a little bit skeptical, like how does this guy have any reach beyond one player or one team? And I gotta say, I was very impressed with the subsequent follow-up. All that to say that Hollywood Brown is going to be chief
Yeah.
within the hour, I'm sure.
He is already, but he just signed.
What? Really?
He just signed. Yeah. 1 year, 7 million up to 11 million.
Are you joking?
No, no. Rappaport, Schefter, everybody. Yeah.
Holy shit.
Yep. Hollywood.
Welcome into It's Always Sunny in Cheese Kingdom. I'm Austin. You can find me on Twitter /X at RealBirdLawyer, on Blue Sky at BirdLawExpert. Here with me, as always, my co-host Taylor at Taylor_Witt on Twitter /X, on Blue Sky at Taylor and Witt, and on Twitter /X. As we were recording the introduction to this podcast, that told me Hollywood Brown is a Chief for a 1-year deal. So we will definitely be talking about that. What's going on, buddy?
Fun that the Chiefs made a move literally as you and I are recording the intro to this episode. Hollywood, let's we'll get into it, but fun times to be a Chiefs fan, of course, as it's always been. It's always
as it always is. We've got a great show for you guys this week. We've got news. Obviously, a little bit of breaking news. The instant that we did the introduction of this podcast, we've got a special project that we've been teasing for a couple of weeks. We are finally ready to unleash the special project. It is called the Next Great American Dynasty, and we are going to be celebrating the back-to-back champs by going back to where it all began, a snowy Saturday afternoon in January 2018 at Arrowhead Stadium. That's right. We are going to review every playoff game in the Patrick Mahomes era. Now, longtime listeners of the pod will remember that we started this podcast shortly after the 2019 Super Bowl championship. So shortly after February 2020, after the Chiefs won Super Bowl Live, that's when we got on and started podcasting, which means we have several playoff games that we've not recapped before. And we had a period of time where, we've been doing this podcasting thing now for 5 years. We have 4 years. 4 years.
Yeah. That's a lot.
Five seasons.
Feels like 5.
We have developed systems and approaches to podcasting. We've become better at the game. We're good at the game now. So we wanted to go back and take another look at these games, and we figured that this would be a good way for us to continue to celebrate the next great American dynasty, the Kansas City Chiefs, without just talking about the Super Bowls over and over again. We've got some deep cuts in here. I mean, It's crazy. We're talking about 18 playoff games, right? There's some of these games that I've seen all of them more than once, but maybe only a couple of times, and some of them that I've not watched in a while. And the one that we're going to start with this week, Colts at Arrowhead Stadium, the first playoff game of the Patrick Mahomes era, is one of those that I had not watched in quite some time. So that's going to be a lot of fun. We hope you guys are going to enjoy that. And we are going to end the show conversation with our friend Dan Harms. He's going to come on to talk a little Super Bowl, a little free agency, look ahead to the draft. Full disclosure, we did record our segment with him on Wednesday night. So Hollywood Brown had not signed. We did get a little bit of his thoughts on Hollywood, sort of as a precursor to that. But let's get into it. So Hollywood Brown is Chief. Let's start there because we are right up to the middle here. 1 year, $7 million, up to $11 million. And boy, Pretty Ricky is batting pretty close to 1,000 right now.
I haven't seen. Now, he did, I think, miss one team, but he got the amount right. I think it was a linebacker or something. But in general, this dude is plugged in, as we talked about. But Hollywood is fun. He's a guy that is obviously he's fast. That's one of his hallmark traits for sure. And he's a guy that he played with Lamar and Kyler, which are different quarterbacks than Mahomes. Both very talented, both look to kind of run first, or at least certainly Lamar did while he played with Hollywood. He's kind of developed into more of a passer now, but Kyler, I don't think was having his best years athletically when Hollywood was in Arizona, and he was hurt a lot. And they had Clayton Tune and Joshua Dobbs and some other guys last year, so they couldn't really quite use Hollywood's skill set, but obviously an exciting player and a guy that when you looked at the free agency market before the offseason began, I don't know if there's a better deal out there for the Chiefs than 1 year, $11 million for Hollywood Brown, given the options in free agency that they had. If you could have picked any contract for any player before free agency began at wide receiver, is this the direction you would have gone with? I mean, I'm pretty fired up about this.
Yeah, me too. Absolutely it is. I think that one of the things that I'm excited about is, we talked about him. This, by the way, wins me, I think, the free agency draft. Unless Mekhi Becton signs with the Chiefs.
That's right.
You could get a 1-1 draw out of this. But Hollywood missed the end of last season. He was inactive for the last 3 games. I don't remember if this was an injury or something like that. So he really only had, and he didn't really play. He did start, but then didn't get any targets. He must have gotten hurt in the fourth to last game against San
Yeah,
Francisco.
that sounds
So I
right.
mean, he really only got a couple of games with Kyler Murray, and one of those games against the Rams, he went off for 88 yards on 12 targets. But other than that, I mean, not a lot of playing time with Kyler. He's the only wide receiver that Lamar Jackson has played with who's ever gotten 1,000 yards receiving with Lamar Jackson. It's hard to put up those kind of receiving numbers with Lamar Jackson as your quarterback. I mean, we
Yeah.
actually, to preview, since it's already happened, the conversation that we had with Dan, Dan made this observation, and, this isn't a knock on Lamar, but like Lamar's improved as a passer. He is not good at throwing deep outside the numbers. You'll hear Dan talk about that when we sort of run it back to the Ravens game. We kind of, that came up in our conversation. And yet, Hollywood went over 1,000 yards in his third season with Baltimore. He had 769 the year before that. So I like the fit. And Ari Mirov wrote, Hollywood Brown didn't have the offers he wanted on the open market, so he decided to sign with the Chiefs on a 1-year deal, play with Patrick Mahomes, and then get back to the market next year. Makes all the sense in the world.
Yeah.
We talk about this all the time,
Mm-hmm.
and it seems to never actually happen.
Yeah.
It actually happened. It happened.
Yeah, I agree.
It happened with Juju a
Uh-huh.
couple of years ago, and now it's
Juju
happened
got freaking
with
paid
Hollywood Brown.
because of that. I mean,
He
that
did.
was
He
that
did,
was
and it
one of the
worked out
best
for him.
career moves we've seen an NFL player make in a long time. Was Juju coming to Kansas City for 1 year and then stealing a bunch of money from the Patriots in his next contract. I
literally
mean,
robbing them blind. I mean,
and
this is the point that I made in our free agency draft, is that
yeah,
that this is the Juju type signing for the Chiefs. Like, not
yep,
necessarily a guy where you want to go out and break the bank. Now they probably could have done that, and if he has a good season and doesn't have long-term health issues, that
mm-hmm,
was really the deal breaker for Juju coming back to the Chiefs. Like, I
mm-hmm,
think the Chiefs
yep,
would have been much more interested in keeping him if they didn't think that his knee was shredded, and they were right about that. The Patriots and their doctors got that wrong because the guy's not healthy. But this is a good, this is it's a great move for the Chiefs. I love that he's a veteran guy who can run a diverse route tree, and that he's the kind of player who I would expect, just like Juju did, to be able to come in and make an impact just in a single season, if that's all it ends up being.
yeah, I completely agreed. His the 40-yard time he didn't run at the combine, but at his pro day in his junior year was 4.33, and I mean that's certainly translated to the NFL as far as just having top end speed. I mean, it's no Tyreek Hill. No one's ever going to be Tyreek Hill, but it's the type of speed that the Chiefs have used in the past, whether that's with Hill or even guys like Demarcus Robinson, where, Mahomes will find you. Like all you have to do is run to an open spot, and speed's the number one way you can do that. I really like the potential now for this wide receiver room with Rashee Rice and Hollywood. And then, depending on how crazy the Chiefs want to get with this, they could either still get nuts and sign Mike Williams or do something, really fun in free agency, or even if they draft a guy, it doesn't now have to necessarily be with a 32nd pick. It could be a second round guy or a third round guy, which we've seen them love to be able to pick up wide receivers in that range. And now you've got a pretty dynamic looking passing offense all of a sudden. Again, I mean, it's fun. I love this.
It definitely is already. And listen, we were both high on the wide receiver room coming into last season.
Yeah, we were, sadly.
There were a lot of guys that could have worked out.
Yeah,
whether it was Kadarius Toney or Sky Moore, Rashee Rice did work out.
Yeah.
Justin Ross,
yeah,
like
totally. Mecole Hardman. I mean, obviously.
Obviously, when he came back, but like the thing is, Hollywood, the wide receiver room right now after this signing is better than it was last year. That
100%.
I feel comfortable saying that without knowing what they're going to do in the draft, without knowing what they're going to do in the rest of free agency. Whatever it is, adding Hollywood Brown to this wide receiver room with another step, year 2 for Rashee Rice, this is a better wide receiver room, and boy, this is fun and unexpected. So let's transition here because we got a lot of news to get to, and we got some huge news that we have not talked about since last week. A franchise cornerstone re-signing with the Chiefs, a 3-time Super Bowl champion, the captain of his unit, one of the longest tenured Chiefs, returning. That's right, James Winchester, the long snapper, is back.
Woo!
Woo! James.
Reunion.
Love that.
Yay.
Yeah, reunion. In all seriousness, welcome back, James Winchester. He is, I believe, tied with Travis Kelce for the longest tenured Chief.
Yeah,
Good to
he's
see
been a
him back.
unit. Yeah.
But we were teasing because it's Chris Jones. Chris Jones is back. We were wondering if it was going to happen, when it was going to happen, if it was ever going to happen, if he was going to make good on his promise that he made to us on stage at the rally, telling us that he wasn't going anywhere, if he was going to renege on his promise. You know, he was sending out the cryptic tweets. We had to go through the whole rigmarole with Chris. But in the end, it all worked out because he is back on a 5-year, $158 million contract. It includes a $30 million signing bonus, $95 million guaranteed. It's an average annual salary of $31,750,000. It does knock his 2024 cap hit down all the way down to $7 million. Brant Tillis, eat your heart out. You know, he's a Panther now, but we can still get those cap hits down, baby. Chris is back. How are you feeling?
I mean, when the Chiefs signed the number one available free agent, things went well. And that's exactly what happened here. Chris Jones was on everybody's board at the very, very, very top as a game wrecker on defense in a position that doesn't have a ton of, dominant players. Like defensive tackle is basically Chris Jones and Aaron Donald, and then everyone else trying to be like them. And
sure.
We didn't exactly get the whole Chris Jones experience this offseason because it happened before, free agency really even was finished, which is unlike a Chris Jones holdout ordeal, which has bled into, last year, the regular season. But just the vibes they're immaculate. They're great. Everyone loves Chris. Everyone loves the contributions, the personality, the just larger than life existence that is Chris Jones. He is an infectious type of dude where when he's talking or smiling or laughing or whatever, like he just kind of brings everybody up. And that's obvious from everybody that you've heard from within the Chiefs organization, whether that's the top brass, whether that's the coaches or the players. Chris is one of those glue guys that just means as much off the field as he does on the field. And let me tell you, he means a shitload on the field. So like that's a super high compliment for a guy that is, I think there's a pretty reasonable argument to be made right now that he's a better defensive tackle than Aaron Donald, just based on the most recent body of work. And I love Aaron Donald as a player. And I mean, if Aaron Donald came out and had an all-pro year next year, no one would be shocked. But the point is, Chris has been a integral part of 3 Super Bowl championships for this franchise. And he deserved every dollar that they were going to give him. He just deserved it. He earned it. And I don't like to look backwards and sign guys to deals based on stuff that they've done for you. You always want to kind of look ahead on those types of deals and pay him for the next couple of years. But I just think that if there's anyone that you can sign a feel-good $95 million guaranteed to, it was Chris Jones. And I mean, I'm fired up that he's a Chief for life.
Yeah, and listen, let's take a peek at what Aaron Donald has done, because that's the player you're comparing Chris to.
Yeah.
Obviously, it took him a couple of years to get to the point where he was in that conversation, because Aaron Donald, first ballot Hall of Famer,
yeah,
one of the greatest defensive players of all time. But listen, Chris is not that far behind Aaron Donald's pace. So Aaron Donald, through his age 29 season, which is where Chris is in his career right now, he was at 85.5 career sacks. Chris is at 75 and a half.
Yeah,
he's only 10 sacks behind Aaron Donald's pace. He's actually started 4 fewer games.
Right.
He's played a few more. He's been a little bit healthier than Donald. But that's not that far off. And spinning forward to, this is essentially a 3-year deal. The last 2 years are kind of funny money just to make, be the highest paid player and, get that AAV up there into record-breaking territory.
Sure.
But listen, Aaron Donald in his age 30 season, which is what Chris is going to be playing on this year, he had 12 and a half sacks That's right in line with what Chris has done the last couple of years, 9, 15 and a half, 10 and a half
Yeah.
last year,
Yeah, right
missing a
in there.
game last year, and obviously missing training camps of coming in, maybe not in the best physical shape. Last year, 2022, I should say, only 5 sacks in 2022. And that was the year, the Rams really kind of bottomed out, right? Like right after their Super Bowl championship,
Yeah.
they had the Super Bowl hangover. Donald got hurt. He only played in 11 games that season, and they had nobody around him. The Rams went 5-12 that year. So not super surprising to see that little bit of a dip in production. And then last year, he was right back up to 8 sacks in 16 games, which, again, like we know that Chris is a high effort player when he wants to be.
Hmm.
And if we're seeing, if he gives us Aaron Donald over the next 3 years, that's 26 sacks over 3 seasons in the regular season,
Yeah.
and is able to play at close to the same level he has in the playoffs, that's absolutely worth the money. I mean,
Sure.
I don't I don't even see how anyone could argue otherwise. And I feel like that really is, barring, a catastrophic injury, that really is probably the floor. I think he has it in him to, and really, if they win the Super Bowl this year, it doesn't, I mean, he could retire and take the money and, literally fuck off to
Yeah.
the Bahamas
Yeah.
and
Worth it.
rob Clark Hunt and, leave whatever $60 million dead cap over the next couple of seasons to do nothing, and it would still be worth it. I mean, like,
Absolutely. You're immortal if you three-peat. And
yeah,
let's not forget, not only are the sack numbers important, which they are, and especially Donald and Jones are two guys that at the defensive tackle position get to the quarterback, which is uncommon for a DT. Most of the time you're plugging up the run game and all that stuff, but Chris Jones bats down passes at an alarming rate for other teams. I mean,
mm-hmm.
he won Super Bowl 54 with some fourth quarter batted down passes, and the pressures that he got in 58 just here a couple of weeks ago now were game winning pressures. I mean, he does a lot. His pass rush win rate is consistently extremely high. He's 6'6", 310. That's the other thing that's funny about Aaron Donald's only 6'1", 284. I mean, he's still prolific as a defensive tackle, but Chris Jones is a massive individual, and getting him plugging up the middle of your defensive line for the next several years at the efficiency and effectiveness that he is, it's a huge win for the Chiefs, for the defense, for Spags, for Chris Jones, for the teammates, everybody involved. Love the clip of Pat at the podium saying
Yeah,
you ain't going anywhere. I mean, it
which
was
they
on.
conveniently held back
They
until he
did until he
actually
signed.
signed,
I
which
loved
which I
that.
love.
Yes,
It's
that's
amazing
shrewd
how
on
much
the
stuff
social
is on the
media team.
cutting room floor. But yeah,
Uh-huh.
no, I love that.
So yeah, I mean, it's certainly the best move that the Chiefs could have announced this offseason. I mean, this was it. This was if they didn't get this move right, I would have been pretty concerned no matter what else happened, even if
Sure,
they,
sure.
let's say extended Snead and whatever. Like at the end of the day, if they didn't bring Chris Jones back, like they failed this offseason, but they did. And so you've got to consider the whole offseason a win, regardless of what else happens.
Before we get to the rest of the news, really quick, no new news on Snead, but we're past the start of the league year. The league year started yesterday. The Chiefs are cap compliant with L'Jarius Snead on the team, playing on the franchise tag. And I would assume it may be a corresponding move coming for Hollywood Brown, but with it only being a $7 million deal, that fits. I think they should be able to make that work with the cap, but they have some other additional restructures that they could do. We're kind of in a little bit of a holding pattern there. We'll see what happens with Snead, but if the Chiefs are able to literally run it back on defense with their two best players coming back, in addition to Trent McDuffie, I mean, really the big three on the defensive side, that would be huge. Before we get into the rest of the news, Hollywood posted on Instagram a screen grab of his text with Andy Reid, and we just gotta read this into the record here. Andy texted him today at 2:51 p.m. Hollywood, think red today. Casey Red with diamonds, winky face. Andy Reid. Hollywood replied, "Yes, sir. Love the sound of that. Heart and ring emoji. Think Hollywood Brown. Lights, camera, action. Rocket ship, rocket ship."
These guys, they're just like me for real.
It's so fun. I love that our guy Drew Tranquil was out there recruiting
Yeah,
him
yeah,
yesterday, and
he
you'll
was.
actually hear us probably mention that during our conversation with Dan Harms because that was going on last night when we were recording with Dan. Just cracked me up. Let's take a quick run through the rest of the signings. Chiefs have been busy the last couple of days. Defensive tackle Mike Pennell re-signing, defensive tackle Derek Nottie re-signing, defensive lineman Turk Wharton re-signing, and safety Dion Bush re-signing, all in the last 2 days. So a lot of familiar faces coming back for a chance at the three-peat. Anybody that you want to shout out, give a special mention to?
I mean the defensive linemen are guys that are good depth pieces, certainly. Everybody knows what Mike Pennell brought to the Super Bowl, which
Yes.
was, I mean, he was a force of nature out there on that defensive line. He was playing like a man possessed, and that was obviously very much needed against a stout San Francisco team. And Nottie's a guy that's just, he's been here. I mean, he's been around the block. He's been with this team now for I believe his rookie year was 18. I think that's correct, off the top of my head. And Turk Wharton's a guy that has flashed. And yeah, these aren't all. I saw some ball knowers. A little disappointed that the Chiefs' plan for the defensive line seems to be run it back when they felt that could have been an area, especially defensive tackle, that the Chiefs could have been a little bit more aggressive on the free agent market. We don't know what they're going to do in the draft yet, so it's an incomplete grade as of now. But
and a deep defensive tackle class is our guy Dan will talk about in the next
segment. And I just feel like there's something to be said, and maybe this is too like in my feelings and not enough like hard fact, but there's something to be said about bringing guys back that have had sustained years long success with this franchise that just makes sense for like what you're trying to do, what you're trying to accomplish. Like, I don't know if I'm sure there are defensive tackles on the market in whether free agency or whatnot that have similar skill sets to these guys, maybe even better skill sets, maybe, you know, something that on paper, if a computer was analyzing things, would have thought that they would have been better signings than the guys that have been here. But
sure.
I just think that when they all get back together, this next training camp and preseason and the regular season, when they all can walk into that locker room and flash the rings at each other and talk about the good times and have the playbooks down already and like just be familiar and be around family with that unit, like it just means a little bit more to me. I've never played in an NFL locker room or anywhere close to anything resembling it, but I just get that sense that like it's important to have familiar faces. It is. Whenever you see a guy sign somewhere, you always then will say like, oh, this wide receiver, he had a position coach that was with him 4 years ago in college, and like he's definitely going to work well with him on this new team. Like they always find links from guys that worked with each other in past jobs, because that's what these guys, they want to be around people that they're familiar with and that they like. And that, I mean, so I'm a big fan of the Chiefs, and they've done this now since 19 really, where they try and run it back as often as they can. And they try and bring their guys back, guys that might mean more to the Chiefs than to other teams. They, you know, they'll bring them back in for more 1 year deals. I mean, none of these deals are big that they brought in for Nottie or Pennell or Wharton or anything, but they're coming back again. And I find that to be fun.
You know, what I find striking about it too is that it takes two, and certainly I understand some cynics amongst us are upset about, you know, a guy like Derek Nottie, who hasn't been a super productive player the last couple of seasons and still is coming back. But listen, like a guy like Mike Pennell, you know, Mike Pennell, we've discussed on this podcast numerous times, was a street free agent when he came and joined the Chiefs for this championship run. And, you know, when we were doing our Super Bowl recap a couple of weeks ago, we shouted him out. We shouted out Jerick McKinnon, and you know, sort of speculated like this might have been it for those guys. And you know, we could be seeing 32-year-old Mike Pennell go into retirement. You know, a guy that didn't have a job in October when Brett Veach, you know, picked up the phone and asked him to come hang out on the practice squad, and then played a huge role in the Super Bowl. He's back. He's not retiring. I mean, this is absolutely a guy that, you know, he's a 2-time Super Bowl champion. There's absolutely would have been no shame at all in Mike Pennell hanging it up and calling it quits, but he doesn't want to do that. Like, he wants to come back and get a chance at a third ring for him and a third ring in a row for the franchise. And I do think like it's cliche, but like I do think that stuff matters to the players, and I think it matters to the guys in the locker room certainly. But I think you saw Hollywood with the ring emoji. I mean, I think it matters to
Should.
veteran players, free agents too. I do think that we are. This has been a meme in Chiefs Kingdom for years that like
Yes.
guys are going to take less to play with Patrick, and like I mean, kind of like maybe
Some of them.
maybe we're finally getting there. I don't know, but it's great to see some familiar faces coming back. Obviously, Dion Bush had the tweet of the day. He had a callback to his initial signing with the Chiefs a couple years ago,
Yeah.
which came the day that the Chiefs traded Tyreek Hill, and asked Chiefs Kingdom what's good, and got just absolutely blown up. But he was excited to be back, and it's fun just to see guys having a good time with it. One new addition besides Hollywood, so this is going to take a little bit of the shine off this. Poor Irv Smith Jr. He was going to be the only new addition to the team, the new face on the team, but he's sort of been overshadowed by the Hollywood signing that obviously went live as we started to record. Irv Smith Jr., tight end, 21 career starts over 4 seasons. He was with the Vikings for 3 years and then spent last season with the Bengals. 973 yards and 10 touchdowns in his career. A guy that both of us have rostered in fantasy. I really thought that, Irv Smith, I definitely picked him up in one of our tight end premium leagues this year. I
Dude,
thought,
yeah.
sneaky little under the radar signing, guy that his athletic testing numbers don't jump off the page, but like he's got some juice, and the knock on him has really always been health. Like he just has not really been able to stay healthy. But this is obviously a player who is still quite young, still should have a lot of good football in front of him. I mean, he was drafted in 2019. He's 25 years old. He'll be 26 when the season starts. A former second round draft pick. I mean, this guy was drafted 50th overall, right, in the
Yeah.
2019 draft. So, tight ends take some time. It used to be, we used to say this about wide receivers, and that doesn't really seem to be the case anymore. Wide receivers seem to come in, and a lot of them, the good ones, make an impact as rookies, but tight ends do take some time. And, I don't know if I'm not going to predict it, the Irv Smith breakout season, but who knows?
Well, if you think about some of the things that tight ends are asked to do in the NFL, they can be a little bit of a different role than what they were doing in college. It can be a little bit more big boy ball at times. And sometimes you do kind of need that man strength. You come in at 21, 22 and you're playing against 26-year-olds, like
Sure.
you might get pushed around a little bit. Now that doesn't typically happen in the trenches. Most of the time those guys are ready to roll because they're gigantic human beings since birth.
Right.
But, for tight ends, they probably spent some time in college or in high school as different positions. They probably didn't settle into tight end right away just based on body type and all that stuff. So I do think that the idea of a tight end developing later makes some sense from just kind of what an NFL tight end is and what they were a couple years ago. They're kind of, guys like Kelsey are kind of changing the way that offenses like to use tight ends. They're not really as much of the tight ends anymore. They're bigger receivers. And I like Irv Smith. Like you, I've been on the fantasy train. I owned him from 2019 through 2023 in our main dynasty league. And always, every time I went to cut players, I was like, I think Irv Smith's going to do something. And then eventually I gave up the ghost. But, a guy that is going to be replacing Blake Bell. So like,
Right.
I mean, he's the guy that has spent more time in the trash man spot the last little bit for us than almost anyone, and just doesn't really. I'm happy to see Blake Bell go, and if the TE3 behind Noah Gray is Irv Smith, then I think that's a step forward for the offense.
It is a little bit interesting because he's not huge. I mean, he's like Noah Gray size. They're both smaller than Travis. He's 6'2", 240. So I mean, he's thickly built, but he's not, he's not Blake Bell. He's definitely not Belldozer sized, and he will not be, quarterback sneaking. I don't think. Although, maybe they won't expect it. They expected it with Blake Bell.
They
They
did.
won't expect it with Irv Smith Jr. Andy, put that back
The
in
Irv
the playbook.
Dozer. Yeah, there's
Exactly.
got to be some type of large machinery that sounds like Irv that we can come up with.
But definitely, an interesting player to have in there. And if they have Travis, Noah Gray, and Irv Smith Jr. on the field, I mean, that's three very athletic, bigger guys that can move. Maybe you've got your 13 personnel
They love
with
13.
with Hollywood as your wide receiver, a deep
Yeah,
speed, your deep speed over the top, and those three guys underneath. I mean, that's
that'll work.
it's
That'll play.
an interesting little situation. Chiefs have also been linked by one person with Fox Sports to former Charger Mike Williams, who was released yesterday in cap saving move for the Chargers, who also, as we were getting on to record this podcast, traded Keenan Allen to the Bears for a fourth round pick. So they now have no wide receivers at all on the roster to speak of. No really legitimate buzz about Mike Williams to the Chiefs, but he did say that he was eager to play with a championship caliber quarterback. A little bit of a dig at his former quarterback, Justin Herbert. Mike Williams do anything for you?
I mean, he does something for me. The news here doesn't. It was by that one idiot that I'm not even going to name because I don't even want anyone to go click on his profile, but just some guy that throws shit at the wall and sees what sticks and said something about he's going to ruin the Chiefs fan base this offseason or kill him because that's what he does. And then the Chiefs went ahead and just won the Super Bowl anyway. Either way, I think Mike Williams does do something for me, certainly. Big X guy. And with the signing of Hollywood and Rashee Rice, the Chiefs don't have like a big X receiver. And I feel like probably one out of every three shows since we started this podcast, you or I have mentioned the fact that the Chiefs could really use an X receiver. Like, like it just feels like, and it worked when Sammy was here. You could tell the offense clicked when Sammy Watkins was healthy. Now he wasn't healthy often, and Mike Williams is certainly more of that same type of concern health wise. He's had his nicks and bruises just like Sammy did. But if the price is good, and I think seeing this Hollywood deal makes me more optimistic that a Mike Williams potential deal would be pretty affordable. I mean, 1 year, $7 million for Hollywood, upwards of 11 is that's MVS money. That's what the MVS was getting paid $11 million a year. That's fine. If you can go get another receiver that has that type of ceiling for MVS money, like freaking do that all day. So I'm interested in Mike Williams. I do not think there's any smoke to this rumor that the Chiefs are linked to him because the guy that does it is an idiot.
I want to circle back to Hollywood just really quickly because this tweet just came across my radar. Drew Nixon, who's a producer for 610, tweeted, "An hour ago, I was told I couldn't get in the elevator at the Big 12 tourney because Chiefs GM Brett Veach was in there and needed privacy." Oh, we
That's
may
amazing.
now know why.
That's amazing.
Incredible.
I do have just a tweet that came across my timeline a couple minutes ago from Cam Marino, who is an NFL guy. He writes for NFL Draft Buzz, and I mean I would say he's a legitimate
He was on the Hollywood stuff this morning.
He was on Hollywood, and he said, "Let's talk L'Jarius Sneed. Strong winds in the direction of Sneed returning to Kansas City to play on the tag this year. A couple of the teams, Colts, Dolphins, and Lions, were aggressive in their pursuit of Sneed, but either went in the other direction and picked another player, or hesitant to give up draft picks. Expensive player coming from a team who wants an expensive return. Tough situation. We'll see what happens." So, strong winds on Sneed returning. I mean, is that best case scenario? I mean, obviously extending him would be great, but like this is not, it's shaping up to be a pretty interesting and great offseason.
I love long-term team building strategies. However,
however,
I would really love to win a third Super Bowl in a row.
More than anything.
And really like I've not done the calculus in my head. I'm starting to do it as I'm speaking. Like my brain is going over the math right now.
Yeah.
Like how fucked I would allow the team to become long-term.
Interesting.
Win 3 in a row. Like if you told me that we're going to miss the playoffs the next couple of seasons, easy, yes.
Sure.
If you told me we're not going to win another Super Bowl for the next 10 years, all right, well, maybe at that point, I at least start thinking about whether I want to do it or not. But this would be, a fourth ring for all the major players on the team, Andy, Travis,
Yeah.
Chris, and of course
Fourth ring in
Patrick.
6 years.
And to do a three-peat, which has never been done in the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
they'd be the greatest team of all time.
That's
Would they not be the greatest team of all time?
They would. I mean, they'd have to be. Like,
they'd have to
be. If you've done something that no team has ever done in NFL history, that makes you the greatest team in NFL history.
And doing something is not just like they scored,
right.
The something is consecutive championships,
exactly,
the most consecutive championships in a row, and plus you throw in 54 in that.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Realm.
In the same window.
If they got 3 and never before or after for these players, and they were just sitting at 3, you could kind of squint and be like,
it'd be 4 in 6 years.
Exactly.
Crazy. And a three-peat. I mean, like that's pretty wild. So all that to say that it's absolutely the best case scenario for the 2024 Chiefs is to have L'Jarius Sneed back playing with the Chiefs. And I think, I tweeted this out earlier today. I mean, I think the Chiefs really have played this situation completely masterfully. Like they tagged Sneed and banked on their ability. Like the risk with tagging Sneed was that if Chris Jones plays hardball and you can't get a deal done, he's a free agent and he could sign with whoever he wants. And you risk losing Chris Jones. And they said, we feel confident about our ability to sign Chris Jones. We will put the tag on L'Jarius Sneed. And then you go to the bank of Mahomes and you say, we would
please.
We would like $30 million in cap space to fix our salary cap situation. You get Chris's cap number down to $7 million with him signing an extension. And suddenly all these teams that were, lowballing the Chiefs because they thought, they're not going to be able to make this. They're not going to be able to make this work with the cap. They can't keep him on the cap.
Yeah.
Well, guess what, bitch? We can, and we did, and here we are. So, I think I would love to be a fly on the wall when Brett Veach calls all those teams back and say, like, yeah, you thought I couldn't do it, but I did it, and the price is not a 4th round pick or whatever you offered me. Like the price
has gone way up.
a second round pick plus, maybe even a late 1st round pick, or we're not going to deal him and. We'll bring him back. We'll have the best secondary in the NFL. We'll have Chris Jones. We'll have a revamped wide receiver room. I'm going to hit another home run in the draft, and we're going to win 3 Super Bowls in a row. And, pay up, or you can deal with it.
And maybe, everyone worries that, well, if they tag Sneed and he plays on the tag, then he's just going to walk in free agency and they only get a comp pick for him, right? That's kind of the worst case scenario. But, like, they could certainly still extend L'Jarius Sneed. They could. Next offseason.
Absolutely, they could.
They could just work out a deal. And then he never even hits free agency. I mean, that happens all the time with teams that have a guy that's on the way out, and they don't even need to mess with tagging, and they just extend him.
They still have until July to work out an extension with him this year. I mean,
exactly.
I mean, obviously they don't know what the cap number is going to be next year, but
and I think Sneed would be a great long-term piece. Obviously, I really like the kid, and he's shown that he's a top-flight corner in the NFL. And if that's the direction, like let's say the Chiefs. They've got their war chest, and they know Creed and Trey Smith are coming up next year. They know that they've got to kind of keep the extension money alive for some guys. They might decide, like, I think this cornerback duo of McDuffie and Sneed is worth completely revamping the offensive line again and letting Smith and Humphrey walk and keeping these lockdown corners. And we'll draft and we'll develop or sign some linemen. But, like, they've got so much wiggle room because of all the wins that they've banked that, like, whatever it is these guys have up their sleeve is probably the right play, and I'm here for it.
Fun stuff. That's going to do it for the news. Let's get into special project territory. It's the Next Great American Dynasty. We are spinning it back to the first of Patrick Mahomes' 18 playoff games, the first one that he ever played in the National Football League, a Saturday afternoon game. Back in January of 2019 against the Indianapolis Colts. This was before we had a podcast, and it was way before we had things like our awards, like the Chief system, the content that our recent listeners and even our longtime listeners have come to know and love didn't exist for this game. So we really get the opportunity to look at this game with a completely fresh perspective and give our signature spin on it. And I'm excited to do it because not only was this the first game of the next great American dynasty. I mean, this was it, the first playoff game, the first playoff win. This was a game that you and I got to attend in person. We were in the end zone. We got a
Uh-huh.
great video of Patrick Mahomes'
I watched it today.
first playoff touchdown. Got me real fired up. And I don't know. I mean, there's just so much to discuss with this game. And I can't think of a better way to discuss it than through the Chiefs system.
The Chiefs system, baby. Of course, you all know it. You love it. It is the system that the Chiefs use when they win NFL football games. And that means that of the 18 playoff games that we're going to be recapping, we're going to be doing a Chiefs system for 15 of them because the Chiefs have done quite a lot of winning in the playoffs over the last 6 years. And that, of course, is the create drama, handle adversity, inspire hope, engage physically, finish strong, separate entirely. We'll just get right into it. Create drama for this game. It was the young pup Mahomes, the 23-year-old who had just gone out there and leveled the NFL with 50 touchdowns and 5,000 yards. It was his first exposure to the playoffs. And that's got its own amount of drama, not only for the player, for Mahomes, but for the franchise that he was playing for. 6-game home playoff losing streak for the Chiefs. There was so much about being a Chiefs fan for a long time, for my entire life before Patrick Mahomes, that was directly tied to playoff heartbreak. That was the defining characteristic of the Chiefs. It was having a good regular season team every, so often, I mean, pretty often, and then figuring out a way to screw it all up when the games matter the most. And so the drama, the Chiefs had just come off of the 2017 collapse against the Titans at home the year before. You and I were in attendance for that game as well.
Yes, we were.
The 2016 loss to the Steelers where the Chiefs scored 2 touchdowns and the Steelers scored 0 and the Chiefs lost that game. I mean, we can go back. We don't have to. But that's the drama that was created, was the atmosphere, the snow. There was a crap load of snow. The field
Yes,
had,
there was.
both sides of the field were kind of sprinkled over with white, not quite like a covering, but you could see snow on the field the whole time you watched the game.
And I think this was his first snow game.
Denver, his first game was cold,
but it wasn't snowing.
It was not snowing. I thought maybe it was okay. You're right. It was just cold. And just the atmosphere with the snow created a kind of like a non-ideal conditions to play offensive football. I mean, it was coming down during the game. It's not like it just dusted it before the game started and then they were running around. Like it was precipitating pretty heavily. And that struck me going back and watching this game was like that this was a heavy snow. This was not just like a, little bit. So that's the drama. Obviously, we had personal drama just being there and freaking out about our first Mahomes playoff game. What do you remember about this game?
I mean, I think all the emotions, I mean, all the stuff that I was feeling going into the game, but like we were pretty sure he was going to win the MVP, which no chief had ever done, but we didn't know that. Obviously,
Drew Brees kind of was the guy that I think
Mahomes and Brees, and Brees got 13 votes and Pat got 37, if memory serves.
That sounds right.
Brees had the all-time great efficiency season. He had like an 80 completion percentage or whatever, and like 3 interceptions or whatever it was. And
I think he set some career mark that year too.
Yeah,
either
good. And he
had
never won an MVP, so people wanted to give him the lifetime achievement award. But we were pretty confident he's going to win the MVP. But listen, like, even though that was an amazing accomplishment and it was an amazing regular season, and obviously way beyond anything that even you and I, as very optimistic early Patrick Mahomes boosters, wanted to see. It's not anything that anybody could have predicted or expected. 50 touchdowns, 5,000 yards in his first season as the starter. But listen, none of that was a predictor of playoff success. And I don't want to overemphasize the importance of the playoffs. At the end of the day, it is just a football game, but it was the first playoff football game that he had ever played. And you really just do not know. I mean, Peyton Manning in his second season in the
Mhm.
NFL, 26 touchdowns, 15 interceptions. In his third season, he threw for 4,413 yards and 33 touchdowns. He finished fifth in the MVP voting. He finished second in the MVP voting in his second year in the MVP race. And then it took him until his fourth season, or excuse me, his sixth season to
Mhm.
win the MVP. That was the year that he got his first MVP, led the league in passing. He was right up there in touchdown passes. But that was when he got his first playoff win. Was the year that he won the MVP, his sixth NFL season.
Yeah.
So, again, like it just winning the MVP is great. And it was obviously a huge accomplishment. We were in attendance for the 50 touchdown game against the Raiders
We were
when he hit both of those benchmarks, the 5,000 yards and the 50 touchdowns. And it was
89-yard
historic.
pass to Demarcus Robinson. It was a great moment.
Exactly right. Raider killer, Demarcus Robinson, classic. But none of that was a predictor of playoff success. And, we haven't talked about the opponent at all in this game, but there was so
Good
much
call.
momentum behind the Colts in
Yeah.
this game,
Andrew
just
Luck,
in
yeah.
terms of, yeah, exactly.
Frank Reich.
Andrew Luck's resurgence. Andrew Luck is back. He had the injuries. This would end up being, spoiler alert, the last game that he played in the National Football League before he retired. And, he had missed the entire previous season. And then with Frank Reich, enjoyed this resurgence. 4,500, almost 4,600 yards, 39 touchdowns. He finished second in touchdown passes in the NFL. He was 11 behind Mahomes, but he had a damn good year for the Colts. He was a Pro Bowler, and they rode a ton of momentum. This Indianapolis team had started off 1-5,
Yeah,
and
right.
they were the first team to make the playoffs after 1-5 start since the Chiefs had done it, and with an almost identical path. They did have a loss in there to the Jaguars, but since beginning the season 1-5, they had won 10 out of 11 games, and including a 21-7 win over the Texans, their division rival, the division winner, actually, because the Colts are the wild card team.
Sure,
The week
Deshaun.
before. Yeah, exactly. And, a lot of people were picking the Colts in this game. And you and I were both confident. And I remember interacting with a Colts fan on Twitter. And I'm actually stunned that as I sit here just sort of narrating stream of consciousness what I was going through, that I remember this interaction.
Yeah.
But I remember
I'm not.
pulling Andrew Luck's home road splits and arguing with this Colts fan that was like, we're going to beat you guys. We won 10 out of 11. Like, we have all the momentum. And it's like, all right, but listen, look at the forecast. This game's outside. You're in Arrowhead. You're in the elements. And your quarterback is not good outdoors. Like, he has a huge home, road, or dome outdoor split in his career.
Yeah.
Much better in a dome merchant Andrew Luck.
Yeah.
And,
sure.
I was confident about this game, but like, again, there just was so much history here and so much negative history here that that's dramatic. That's creating drama.
Yeah, we definitely have a history. I've been confident before Colts playoff games in the past, and it sure bit me during
Sure,
those.
the Colts. I mean, Jesus.
Colts Chiefs playoff game, that is enough to send chills down the spine of anyone who's been alive for the Chiefs. Extended run of horrors against that team. So how do the Chiefs, what do they do about that drama? Well, of course, they handle adversity, and we got to shout out the crazy, horrible defensive coordinator that is Bob Sutton, because he was in his bag in this game. Now, part of that could be attributed to dome merchants not being in a dome, but the Colts started out this game with 4 straight 3-and-out drives, did not record their first down of the game until 1:40 left in the second quarter. They came out, and the Chiefs were on top of everything that they were trying to do side to side. The Colts dropped a couple balls early that would have been first downs, and really just in general were completely out of sync on offense. And then the Chiefs, of course, they started off the game and they scored a couple touchdowns. And anytime the Chiefs score a couple touchdowns on somebody, especially the Patrick Mahomes led Chiefs, it just short circuits them. It just short circuits the opponent. And unlike, when the Chiefs get down by a couple touchdowns, where that kind of lights the fire under them, when the Chiefs get up a couple touchdowns, like that game's over. Like that, they just, and the Colts were a shining example of that. They just really didn't know what they were doing. Handling adversity in this early portion of the game. I mean, there aren't too many games where you can, when the second quarter ends, you can be like, oh, this game's over. The Chiefs won it, but this was certainly one.
Yeah, I mean, from the jump, really, in this game, the Chiefs came out and dominated on defense, which was just, I mean, if anything, that was the least expected development of this game. I mean, like
Yeah.
the defense, we talked about this. I think, I mean, this is our first time podcasting about the season, but I remember you and I for weeks during the season, every week the DVOA update would come out. And for like the first 6 or 7 weeks of the season, the Chiefs were first in offense. They were first in special teams DVOA, and they
Yeah.
were 32nd on defense.
Yep.
They finished the year, I think, 25th in defensive DVOA, which is still very bad. Let's be clear.
Shouldn't even be a playoff team with that defense.
You shouldn't, and there have been very few teams that have made the playoffs, let alone as the number one seed in the NFL with the best record in the AFC. But yeah, this was like, it's crazy because I don't even really know where this came from. Like the Chiefs were
Sure.
they had not been good all year with Bob Sutton as the defense coordinator, and they really hadn't been very good the year before. Obviously,
No.
like the second half of the 2017 season, right through the second half collapse against the Titans, where the Chiefs were 21-3, I think it was, at halftime, and blew that lead in the second half, got shut out in the second half, but had an 18-point lead. The Bob Sutton defense obviously was the one that blew the huge lead to Andrew Luck and the Colts in Indianapolis.
Exactly.
One of the largest blown leads in playoff history. So I don't know where this came from. And I kind of like, when I went back and watched the game now, I was like, who's this guy coordinating this defense? Because I really don't. This was such an outlier from how the 2018 defense played, especially against a team with good offense. They got after Blake Bortles, right? Like they got after the Jags. They got after some bad teams. They led the NFL, or they were tied for the NFL lead in sacks. But like that's because they had the best offense, one of the best offenses in NFL history.
Yes.
Putting them ahead and giving the pass rushers the ability to pin their ears back and go after the quarterback. This was just an all-time out of nowhere performance by Bob Sutton.
Completely agree. It was just something that, I mean, and it was, not necessarily perfect timing, because the Chiefs put up 31 in this game, spoiler alert. So they probably could have, done with saving some of these Bob Sutton masterpiece jobs for a little bit later, but it is what it is. They handled the adversity. For I inspire hope, I saw a 4th and 1 number from this game that the broadcast shared that I wanted to share with you and the audience. So the Chiefs in the regular season ran 10 plays on 4th down and 1. 4th exactly, not 3rd or 4th, and 1 exactly, which I thought was a fascinating amount of times that the Chiefs went for it on 4th and 1. Take a stab at how many of them they converted in the regular season.
I actually missed the stat. I must have been ADDing out when I rewatched the game. So I'm glad that you gave me the opportunity to do this.
It's either going to be high or low, right? That's usually why
it's going to be.
I'm
exactly.
not going to say 7.
And I'm trying to think of which one. Let's say it was 9 out of 10.
Sure, it exactly was 9 out of 10. Good pull.
Nice.
So the Chiefs were extremely efficient on 4th and 1 in the regular season. 9 out of 10 was the most conversions in the regular season. A couple teams were like 4 for 4 or whatever, so percentage, but they were 9 was the most. And then in this game, they went for it 3 times on 4th and 1 and converted all 3 times in this game. So Andy and Bieniemy for sure had something where they liked. All 3 plays were Damian Williams runs in this game, and all 3 of them worked to perfection. The first one was an 11-yard gain. The second one, even though he only gained 4, was a wide open 4. And then the last one was the hardest one. Damian Williams scratched for 2 yards on 4th and 1. But I just thought that inspire hope. Sometimes when you've got a defense that either struggles or is playing well or whatever, but if the game script calls for stepping on someone's throat, which this game called for it, I liked that the Chiefs were aggressive and going forward on 4th and 1, even when they were relatively comfortable on the scoreboard. It was something that, frankly, I don't think we see very much from the Chiefs these days. I don't know if that's a product of, maybe they feel safer with their defense now, so they can kind of punt it away and feel okay with that. And that's perfectly reasonable strategy. But I liked the aggressiveness here. It inspired some hope in me watching this, that the Chiefs were not going to just give this ball back to Andrew Luck. They knew that if they could just keep putting points on the board, there's no way he was going to match him with points. And that's exactly what they did.
You know what's crazy about that fourth down stat too is that this predates the knee injury that
It
caused the
does.
Chiefs to completely scrap the quarterback sneak for Patrick Mahomes. And it's crazy that it's we obviously know that they have not run the quarterback sneak with Mahomes a single time since he injured his knee in Denver in the 2019 season. But it's not like they were running it all the time before then either.
No,
Like it
no.
was not it was not
In
something.
fact, I think I saw that was his first career sneak attempt
Really?
in
I was
Denver.
gonna say, like
At the time of
I
the
was trying to
injury, I'm
find
pretty sure I
numbers, but
remember this. I'll have to do some research on that later, but
that could
I'm pretty
be.
sure that's
And
the case.
I mean, I don't remember him doing it any other time. Now, obviously, if he did
Yeah.
a random,
Yeah.
fourth and
It
one
wouldn't
sneak
be that notable. Yeah.
sometime in the 2018 regular season, I probably wouldn't remember that. But yeah, it's crazy
No, I'm
that
pretty sure I saw that was his first attempt in the NFL at a sneak, and that's how it went.
absolutely wild.
He
First
did injure his knee in this game.
first and only. Yeah, he did. Right. He
He
got
was
banged up.
throwing a
Yep.
left-handed second down attempt and landed awkwardly on his knee, and I mean was up and really, really struggling to stand for a second, and then limped to the sideline. He ended up, of course, not missing any time in this game. But I did remember thinking that, like, oh yeah, this is 2018. This is before any of his major
Uh-huh.
any of his injuries. I mean,
Uh-huh.
he had been completely healthy in 18 up until this playoff game, and yeah, I did think that was
And
funny.
I agree. And before it became a playoff tradition for him to
Yeah, exactly.
be injured for the playoffs, I completely forgotten about that happening in this game. And then he took a shot to the knee, and they said, "Oh no, Mahomes
Yeah,
is
this
in
is
a
the
ton of pain, and he's gone down, and what's going to happen?" And it's like, "Ah, I just completely forgot that
yeah,
happened in this
yeah,
game."
me
But yeah,
too.
absolutely.
And then, of course, after Inspire Hope is engaged physically, I want to talk about the running game on both sides of the
Mhm.
ball, really the
Yeah,
trenches here, but the backs as well. The Colts had 12 rushes for only 70 yards with Marlon Mack and Naeem Hines, and really never got anything going. I mean, they leaned heavily on Luck, as you would expect in this type of game, but with him not performing, their passing game was really struggling too. Their run game just couldn't lift them out of any holes. And then on the other side, the Chiefs had 32 rushes for 182 yards and 4 rushing touchdowns. This is the only Chiefs playoff game with more than 2 team rushing touchdowns in any playoff game, and they had 4. So they were certainly running it all up and down and finishing. This was, of course, it had a Tyreek Hill sweep rush touchdown. It had a Patrick
yeah.
Mahomes scramble rush touchdown. And then it had one each by both backs, Damian Williams and Darrell Williams. And they did whatever they wanted against the Colts team running the ball. And when it's cold and it's a playoff game, and you're mixing it up and trying to get to the AFC Championship game in the next round, it's really nice to be able to run the football. And this was also, let's not forget, the year that they dismissed Kareem Hunt from the team. So
Right.
Damian Williams was not, the set RB1 for all year, and really
Right. I
just,
mean, Kareem was released in December. So,
exactly.
I
This
mean,
was
this had
this
only
was
been a
like
month.
3 weeks, I think,
Right.
since the Kareem release, and of course, Damian Williams, playoff Damian, who was one of the all-time great NFL playoff performers, shows up in this game too, and yeah, just a really impressive, performance by both the Chiefs' run D and their run up.
What I found so interesting about going back and watching this game is how it, in many ways, sort of foreshadowed what teams would ultimately do against the Chiefs in the years to come. Like
Yeah, good point.
The Colts played a lot of shell coverages in this game. I mean, like the game plan here, whether they got to it from 2 high or 1 high with a couple of corners playing deep. The plan here was not to let the Chiefs beat them over the top, which was a reasonable plan considering that Mahomes had thrown for 5,050 and had you know prime Travis Kelce, prime Travis Kelsey, prime Tyreek Hill, completely reasonable game plan. But the Chiefs needed to run the ball in this game because they weren't getting the downfield passing attack going. And obviously, the weather played some role in that too. The
Yeah,
receivers had a
certainly.
little case of the drop season in this game. Another foreshadowing bit there. But yeah,
Time's a flat circle, man.
the Chiefs needed to lean on the run game in this game, and this was an impressive performance by them because obviously we know that after running backs aren't everything, but Kareem certainly had another level of dynamism to him that I mean not in terms of necessarily
Agree.
top end speed because obviously Damian faster runner than Tyreek, but or not Tyreek, but Kareem Hunt. And Kareem just had, a level of physicality and the ability to make guys miss and the ability to break tackles that the Chiefs have not had in a running back since then. I mean, if we're being honest, so they needed to have the running game working in this game. The passing game was fine, it was productive, but it was a
Yeah.
lot of it was what it surprised me about rewatching this game was how many times it was Mahomes scrambling and throwing back across his body
Yeah.
or
He
doing a
looked
little
like a
Mahomes
kid.
play for like 12 yards,
Uh-huh.
like just the like what we've seen him do the last couple of years since teams really decided to put a cap on him throwing the ball down the field. It's him creating, him scrambling and him doing all these little things with his eyes and his arm angles and, his contortions out there to pick up a first down and not to heave the ball 50 yards downfield to Tyreek for a touchdown. And yeah, I mean, it was very much an engaged physically type of game for the Chiefs.
How funny was it to hear just Alan Chris talk about
Yes.
Mahomes? I
Yes,
mean,
it was.
that was one of the most just
I
intoxicating parts of this game to
yes, it
me
was
was
amazing.
them marveling at this kid and nothing's phasing him and like just
Right.
things that these days
He
are
grew up in a major league locker room
well, of
and
course. Yeah, they have to tell
his
every story that we've heard a
dad
thousand times
pitched for
about him.
10
Yeah.
years
But
and
like the way that they marveled at how quickly he's adapted to the NFL and
yeah,
like so many times what Chris Collinsworth would say is that's something I expect to see out of a veteran. Like
right.
that was how many veteran plays 23-year-old Patrick Mahomes made in this game. The checks, I felt like at the line of scrimmage, Mahomes has always been, and I guess I kind of took this for granted, but he's always been very vocal and he's always been very active at the line of scrimmage. Not a lot of quarterbacks are super
Right.
active, especially young. They can maybe figure it out as they age into the NFL, but like since the moment that kid stepped onto an NFL field, he was directing traffic the whole time. And that's the type of stuff that, we've kind of been lulled into this sense of security with Mahomes and kind of taken some stuff for granted that he does every day. But then you go back and you watch him when he was in his first season starting in the playoffs, and it's just like, man, he really did have it all figured out right from jump. It was a lot of fun to see, and so of course the Chiefs have to finish strong in this game. The Colts did after the Chiefs or the both teams kind of sent it back and forth to each other, not really doing much. The Colts earlier in the game blocked a punt for a touchdown that was really their only offense, but then they did score a touchdown to make it 24-13 with 5:31 to go. It would have been 24-14, but Adam Vinatieri missed a point after earlier, missing a 23-yard field goal. That's a field goal from the 6 or the 5-yard line. So certainly the Hall of Fame kicker was not having his best playoff performance. Imagine that. He leaves Tom Brady and all of a sudden doesn't know how to kick in the playoffs. That's just so strange. But the Chiefs essentially ended the game, not the final score, but they ended the game on an 8-rush, only 1-pass touchdown drive that ate 3 of the final 5 minutes up on the clock and turned the scoreboard into what would be the final score, 31-13, on their 4th rushing touchdown of the game with their 4th player. The last one was, of course, Darrell the Barrel Williams. Finishing strong in this game, when the Colts cut it to 11 with 5:31 to go, I mean, there have certainly been games in NFL history that game turns out the other way, and that's only that's 2 touchdowns. Even if you kick a field goal, the other team can score 2 touchdowns. So, was nice to see that the Chiefs did finally put their foot on the throat and go put that game out of reach. Finish strong.
Yeah, I mean, I remember that last, well, not the last score, but when they cut it to 11, That
Yeah,
was really the only time in this game that I had any apprehension at all.
I think that's
And
fair. Yeah.
you
After
know, it
kickoff, of
was
course.
yeah, of course, but it was in the second half of a playoff game. And as you mentioned, you and I had just been at the Tennessee game the year before.
Hmm.
And the Chiefs had an 18-point lead in that game at halftime, and they frittered that away. It was a horrible, cold, windy game. We were in the upper deck for that one. We were in the lower bowl for this one, but it was still cold. It was I was gonna say weathery. That's the only
Yeah.
way I can describe it,
Yeah,
but
it was
that's
weathery.
not a word, but it was weathery. Uh, this answer from the Chiefs was just, I mean, that's in a lot of ways, that's the difference between, that's when you knew it's like this is not the same old Chiefs because previous Chiefs teams, you give up that score to make it an 11-point game. There are plenty of teams in NFL history, including the Chiefs, that have blown that lead and have blown it against the exact same team wearing the exact same
Man,
outfit, the
no
same laundry.
freaking joke.
Like it could have been different. It could have been the same, but it was different. And
Yeah.
as our girl Taylor Swift would say, if one thing had been different, would everything be different today?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
everything was different because the one thing that was different was Patrick Mahomes.
Perfectly said. So, of course, you can't just have a chief system. It has to be the Chiefs system,
Yeah,
including
of course.
separating entirely, which is our favorite stage of the Chiefs system because that's the point when the game is won. The Colts could not score on their last drive after the Chiefs salted the game away. So the Chiefs separated entirely and locked in their first home AFC championship game in franchise history, the
Mm.
first year of Patrick Mahomes starting for them. I mean, just thinking about what this win meant for the franchise. It snapped their 6 game home losing streak in the playoffs, which was a mind numbingly brutal streak. If you're going to have a
Yeah,
losing streak
yeah.
in the playoffs, like home games are games that you should be better than your opponent in usually. I know that sometimes wildcard teams can come in
You
and
have home field advantage, so
yeah, you're expected to win those
you're
games.
the higher seeded team. So
Usually. Yeah, I mean, or yeah, always. And then so the Chiefs had lost 6 of those games. They won here, which broke that. They sent the first Arrowhead playoff home crowd away happy for the first time since 1993. I
yeah.
mean, that's insane that it took 15 years to do that. And then not only that, but to be setting up a hosted AFC championship game the next round is it's a step away from the Super Bowl. That's what that game is. And I
Yeah.
do really remember walking away from this game and just kind of daydreaming and being like, "Oh my god, like the Chiefs have never been a step away from the Super Bowl since I
Yeah.
was 6." Like
Right.
and now here they are
In the
and
first year with
they've got
Patrick
the
Mahomes.
MVP and they've got
Right.
this kid that can do no wrong and who cares if Tom Brady's on the other end? Let's go. And I just the separation here felt extra special to me.
It's crazy everything that you're just saying. What I love about this project and what I hope our listeners will love about this project is it really is it's great to go back and have this perspective that we have now.
I
Like
agree.
remembering how happy we felt to be there, just to be in the AFC Championship game,
Yeah, it's something that they've done literally every year
which
since.
we've now
Yeah,
been in
yeah,
every year for 6 years in a row,
yeah.
is wild. But like
It was special.
it was special, and it is special. It
It
remains
is.
special. I
It
mean,
is.
the first one at Arrowhead, and then they went on to host four more the next 4 years in a row at Arrowhead Stadium, and obviously made it to 4 Super Bowls and won three,
Huh, imagine that.
which we'll get to.
We'll
But
cover.
yeah, I mean, it's crazy too. Like, I mean, the the significance of this game in NFL history. Like Andrew Luck, obviously, this is the last NFL game that he played in. A player that, had he played longer, certainly would be somebody that I think had he had a 15-year career, would have gotten consideration for the Hall of Fame.
Certainly.
Adam Vinatieri somehow came back and played another season after this. I could have
Yeah.
sworn that
Yeah.
this was also his last NFL game,
It
but he
basically
came
was.
he came back the next season as a 47-year-old man and tried to kick the football and was pretty bad and got cut midway through that season and never kicked in the NFL again. But like this was really the first quarterback career that Patrick Mahomes killed. And I get it. Injuries took Andrew Luck from us. But if you think about all the careers that he's changed and stymied and crushed and wiped out over the course of his 6 years as an NFL starter, it's worth remembering this one here at the very beginning that he, took a 30-year-old quarterback who, was the most hyped quarterback since John Elway, another Stanford #1 overall pick, and
I
sent
figured you'd throw
him
him in there.
we got to get him in here, especially we're doing a callback to the early days of the show.
Yeah.
Got to get a little Elway.
We'll try and work him in every week if we can.
Sure, of course we will. It's worth remembering that he put Andrew Luck in retirement. I mean, if Andrew Luck wins this game, does Andrew Luck retire? Does Andrew Luck make a Super Bowl?
Right.
Is he able to beat the Patriots in Foxborough and get that monkey off his back? With the momentum, 12 out of 13 wins, a win over the Chiefs in Arrowhead.
Yeah.
Do
Go beat
we
the
think
Rams
about
in the Super Bowl? Yeah.
Do we think about his career differently? And
certainly,
it's crazy. I think this is going to be a recurring theme as we sort of spin through these recaps, like all the different roads that we could have gone down to get to where we are now is pretty remarkable. And it all started here. It was a hell of a win. So with that, let's put a bow on the Chiefs system and let's turn to our awards. The awards have been a long-time staple of this podcast. I'd have to go back and look at the show logs to see when exactly we started doing them, but we've been doing them a lot longer than we've been doing the Chiefs system.
Yeah.
However,
but not this one.
As I mentioned, we did not have a podcast when this game was played, and we've never recapped this game before. So that means we've never given out awards. We haven't quite decided how we're going to do the awards for games that we have recapped before, whether we're just going to take a look at what we did the first time, whether we're just going to redo them again.
I think we're going to redo them with our new perspective. I think that's what we decided.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So for those of you unfamiliar, we have 3 types of awards. We have our 5-star men, who through their play shout, "I'm a 5-star man." We have our trash men.
I'm the trash man. I come out, I throw trash all over the ring, and then I start eating garbage.
Who are eating garbage all over the field through their play. And then we have our wild cards.
Wild card, bitches! Yeah!
Who, of course, are capable of anything. I will take the first 5-star man, and I will give that award to Damian Williams. Obviously, we've already mentioned how good he was in this game. The numbers really do jump off the page. I mean, he really had not ever gotten this kind of run as a starter. He had been in Miami sort of as a supplemental, as a satellite back. He was never really a full-time, 25 carry a game guy. He got 25 carries in this game. He came away with 129 yards and a touchdown on the ground, and then 5 receptions on 6 targets for 25 yards. I mean, this was a player that, of course, has a special place in Chiefs lore for what he did in the Super Bowl the following year. But this was really an important game for him post Tyreek Hill, or not. I keep saying that. Post Kareem Hunt,
sure.
Another guy that wore out his welcome in Kansas City and got shown the door, but for completely different reasons. We still love you. We still love you, Tyreek. I mean, just an incredible performance by Damian Williams as, in a lead role. Something that we weren't really sure what the post Kareem Hunt Chiefs were going to look like. And a 5-star man performance by Damian Williams showed us that, hey, still looks pretty good.
He certainly was effective in this. We talked about the 4th and 1s that the Chiefs converted on the ground. You mentioned his carry numbers, 25. Let me tell you his top carries for his career in attempts. In the regular season, he had 3 games above 13 carries ever.
That's crazy.
He had 2 games with 16 carries and 1 with 19. Those are his top 3 regular season games as a starting running back. In the playoffs, he has 3 games over 16 carries, which is he only has 1 regular season and he has 3 playoff games. So his 3 of his top 4 games by total carries ever are playoff games, 2 17 attempt games and this game at 25.
25.
So this was
Crazy.
6 more carries than any other game he had in his career. And we've talked about playoff Dame before. He has 11 touchdowns in the playoffs in
Right.
6 games. I mean, that's just a
Unbelievable.
mind-numbing clip for a guy that had 25 regular season touchdowns in 101 games. I mean, just crazy. Good nomination there. The ground game was really working. I'll go in the air for this one, and I'll go with Travis Kelce. Travis Kelce was pretty vintage tough in this. 7 receptions for 108 yards, had a really, really nice 30-yarder, and just in general, had a couple where he would catch it, 2 Colts would smash into him, and he held onto the ball, got up, signaled first down, kind of did his normal playoff Trav stuff. At this time in the 2018 playoffs, Trav had, of course, been playing for 4 years, but his playoff performances in 15, 16, and 17, he didn't get to play a ton of games in those and had a total of 23 receptions. And in this one, he, had 7. So he certainly was making up for lost time earlier, and just looked the part, looked like the safety blanket that a young quarterback might rely on in an offense, and certainly worthy of a 5-star man performance.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at Travis's playoff performances before this game, he had his very first playoff game ever against Houston in that game where the Chiefs snapped their playoff losing streak on the road, the 30-0 win over the Texans in 2015. That was Trav's first playoff game, and he went for 128 yards in that game. But this was his first 100-yard performance in 4 tries since then. And, I mean, we're talking about a player that now has surpassed Jerry Rice for playoff catches, right?
Yeah,
right. This is a guy with, whatever you said, 20-something playoff receptions, and now he's over 150.
Yeah,
And he's past Jerry Rice. So it's crazy to look back on all of this, where we were 6 short years ago. Yeah, I mean, just wild. Let's spin forward to our trash man. I will say this was a little bit of a challenge because this was a dominant performance by the Chiefs. I'm going to pick on Steven Nelson. He allowed 54 yards in coverage in this game, 3 receptions. That was the most by any Chief. The Chiefs just absolutely, completely dominated this game in the air, and I mean, frankly, on the ground as well, but just completely shut down this proficient Colts passing attack. I mean, Andrew Luck, 19 of 36 for 203 yards in this game. So Steven Nelson accounted for a quarter of the Colts passing yards in this game. What's funny about Steven Nelson is, this was his last year as a Chief, and he's gone on to have a pretty good career. He was with Houston, he was with the Steelers, and he's always pretty highly graded by Pro Football Focus. He is still playing in the NFL. He continues to collect pretty hefty paychecks for his age and what I would consider to be his level of ability. But he's had a good post Kansas City career, and good for him. But he was my trash man for this one.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's totally reasonable. And again, as you said, it was actually so hard to come up with a Chief for the trash man that I decided not to. I decided to pick a Colt. And what better Colt to pick on than the guy that missed 2 very short kicks, missed a 23-yarder and an extra point, and a guy that, won Tom Brady a bunch of Super Bowls. And so, of course, I've got to pick Adam Vinatieri as the trash man. It's not like his 4 points that he missed there would have made the difference in this game that the Chiefs won by 18, but he blew it. He blew it hard. And that always is worthy, especially when the Chiefs don't have too many guys that we can really go out there and nitpick. So Adam Vinatieri, you suck. Trash.
Ooh, love that. Let's do wild cards. I will pick a coach. And I'm picking, of course, defensive coordinator Bob Sutton.
Man, yeah.
I mean, what can I say about this that we haven't already said? Bob Sutton, this was a total wild card performance because I did not see anything like this in the entire 2018 season, and we would not see it the following week when the Chiefs hosted the AFC Championship game against Tom Brady and the New England Patriots. This was like a perfect storm of I don't know if Steve Spagnuolo's still living ghost possessed
Still,
possessed Bob Sutton
that's good.
when he was game planning this week, because that's kind of what it felt like. It's like the Chiefs just had the perfect game plan to shut down this high flying Colts offense, and the very next week they had absolutely no answers, and Tony Romo was making his bones in his playoff debut, predicting every third down coverage and pass that the Chiefs were going to give up. It was so unexpected, and I don't know. I wish that it hadn't given me the false hope to think that, like, oh, maybe, like, if this is the defense we're going to get in the playoffs, like, all right, we're going all the way. So Bob Sutton, my pick for the wild card for this performance.
Yeah, totally fair. You know how some teams randomly like ask a random coach that's not doing much to help them out in the playoffs?
Yeah,
Happens all the time. Maybe Bob called up Steve and was like, "Listen, buddy, you're the GOAT defensive coordinator before you go and win a couple Super Bowls here with us. Let's see what you got for this one."
Well, Steve had worked with Andy in the past, so
yeah, he'd be into it. I'm sure he'd be into it. I'm sure he came in and talked and then had the great performance, and then afterwards they were like, "Listen, Bob, we know that wasn't you. Just tell us who helped you." And then he does, and they're like, "All right, we're gonna hire that guy instead."
What's super funny about that too is that Steve Spagnuolo was not coaching in the NFL in 2018.
That's what I'm saying. He had time. Like it makes the timeline adds up. I'm not saying it definitely happened, but I'm certainly not saying it definitely did not.
He was not employed by another team, so
that's the classic formula.
It could have happened,
and it probably did, if we're being honest. For my wild card, I will go with the guy that he's certainly capable of anything. A guy that I miss doing recaps and picking this guy for awards. It's the Cheetah. It's Tyreek Hill. He, right after a first quarter fourth down conversion, the very next play was a 36-yard end around touchdown to Tyreek, where, I mean, in the snow, good freaking luck catching that guy. He was obviously
the Cheetah can run in the snow.
He can, and he knows where he's going to cut before you do, and that's just a recipe for disaster. He did have 8 catches for 72 yards, which is great, but he fumbled the ball once. They ended up recovering it, but he also dropped a couple that were right in his breadbasket. That, I know the elements played a factor and all that stuff, but look, we're stretching. They've had a really good team performance here, and the wild card nature of Tyreek's performance is really just watching him as a 2024 Chiefs fan and just being like, man, that guy really was capable of anything, and
he was special.
He was special. And even when he dropped passes, and even when, points of his career, they would be kind of Kadarius Toney him and pop him up in the air, and defenses would pick him off. He still produced so many highlights, so much production that hard to really look on his time in Kansas City as anything other than a rousing success. He was my pick for this first playoff win of the Patrick Mahomes era wild card performance.
I love that, and I am strangely looking forward to next week. We will be, of course, recapping the Chiefs-Patriots AFC Championship game, the end of the 2018 season, and I have not watched that game in several years, so it'll be fun to go back and take a look at that. It certainly takes a lot of sting out of watching that game, knowing that the Chiefs went on to win 3 Super Bowls
100%
over the next 5 seasons that followed after that. But join us next week for the next episode of the Next Great American Dynasty. And now, Dan Harms.
Joining us now is friend of the show. You know him, you love him. You might have seen his work in anywhere, any corner of the internet that talks about football, whether it's RGR Football on YouTube and on NFL33.com, his fantasy football stuff over at Football Guys on Twitter, and co-host of the Cover One Draft podcast, and soon to be, I'm sure, on ESPN NFL Morning Countdown. Dan Harms. Dan, how the hell are you tonight?
Oh, well, I appreciate that very much. And we'll see how long it takes before we get anywhere further, but I'm pretty happy doing what I'm doing here. And I always appreciate you guys having me on. So thank you for the intro. I'm doing fantastic. Ready to talk some Chiefs and NFL draft football.
Let's maybe start off with Super Bowl question, because we haven't had you on since the end of the regular season, and this is we're a month out, with the month anniversary just passed the other day, and just be honest with us, Dan. Did you ever think that the 2023 Chiefs were going to win the Super Bowl?
I mean, I thought after, the first couple of weeks, I was still pretty confident, but after that Las Vegas Raiders game, it was I don't know. I really don't know where this team's at, but right after that game, we talked about how teams hit rock bottom, and that felt like the rock bottom moment. And now we have all this information where, Brett Veach, Andy Reid, Steve Spagnuolo all got together and reevaluated what they were doing after that football game. And that, again, goes to show you that at some point they were like, we can still do what we're trying to do. And the Raiders game showed them, no, you can't do that. So at the end of the whole season, watching them go back to the Bengals game, even though it wasn't against Joe Burrow, you could see their offense start to, again, get more simplistic. Stop trying to be more than it was with the offensive players that they had, and get back to the run game a little bit more, which was hugely important to their success 2 seasons ago now. So no, after the entirety of this long explanation, for most of the season, I didn't feel like they were going to be this team to be able to win the Super Bowl, but there was always that glimmer of, this defense is so good that it might not matter offensively. It really might not. And Patrick is so good at turning it on in the postseason. Just get in and see what happens.
The phrasing of this question just kind of made me think. I wonder, and I'd have to go back through historically, but I wonder if any Super Bowl winning team has ever hit their metaphorical rock bottom in week 17 of the regular season, right? That is a huge hill to climb, to go win 4 playoff games. Of course, 2 of them on the road, and everything that they accomplished in the playoffs. But after literally having the rock bottom moment of the season in the second to last game, just crazy to me. Throughout the playoff run, when did you kind of sit there to yourself as a Chiefs fan and be like, they could do this? Was it the Bills game? Was it what point?
It was the Bills game. I was pretty confident they were going to beat the Miami Dolphins, considering, even a little bit of snow and the entire Miami Dolphins offense disappears because Tua can't throw in wind or cold. So I wasn't really worried about that myself, but it really came into, and it wasn't even the way that they beat the Bills, because their defense was so hurt. I knew the Chiefs were going to be able to move the ball. It was the decision-making on the defensive side. We are not going to let Josh Allen throw the ball down the field like he did against us every other playoff game. You guys want to run the ball? Go for it. I don't care. And that's exactly what it was. It showed me the defensive game plan that Steve Spagnuolo, once again, is going to be in the Hall of Fame for. He should be in the Hall of Fame because and I know that defensive coaches don't usually get in. I think they're going to make an exception for what he's doing. But when he's gotten to the postseason, he's the best in the NFL at defensive game planning each singular game. So going into that game, it was all about, again, at Buffalo, more snow, more cold. How are they going to deal with Josh Allen? And yes, he was really, really good. They ran the ball extremely efficiently. But at the end of the day, it was like, when this comes in the fourth quarter, or the second half, okay, we're going to start taking some of this stuff away. And what do you have left? You don't have anything. And they couldn't throw the football. The times that they did get some guys free down the field, they had drops. It was very reminiscent of what the Chiefs went through this whole regular season. So when I'm watching Spags do this, it put a lot of pressure on Josh Allen and those big plays to complete those big plays. And those are, again, 50-50, maybe at best 55-45 attempts. And when you don't get those, it's tough to climb. And like I said, I knew that the offense was going to be fine, but that game showed me that, one, this defense game plan wise is going to be just fine. I'm not worried about that. And it just comes down to Patrick making a few plays, and obviously the return of Travis Kelce in the postseason made everything so much more smooth, and it created the dynamic of the offensive play. So that was really what it was for me, seeing how Steve Spagnuolo once again comes up with these game plans and these specific ways that they're going to attack or allow offenses to do what they do. And that's the thing. He allowed the Buffalo Bills to run the football. It was a calculated decision because that takes away the most dangerous part of their game. And that's what that was. And you fast forward to the Super Bowl, they did the same thing. But they took away the run game. And I know that he had some plays, but there was inefficiency. And at its best, it was inefficiency at its best. So they just chunked on every single time that Christian McCaffrey ran the football. And they said, all right, and then we'll get into it. But that's, I'm getting ahead of myself here, but I'm having too much fun.
Well, let's talk about the Super Bowl, Dan, because obviously it was a back and forth game, and something that we've been asking our guests about this game is, really for you, when was Dan's heart rate at its highest? What was your tensest moment in this game? Because obviously you have a Super Bowl going to overtime, the first playoff overtime game with the new overtime rules. Chiefs get the opportunity to possess the ball. The Niners go for it first. You had the Niners with a chance to run the clock down and win the game in regulation. They had a chance to potentially score a touchdown and put the Chiefs in a really tough spot in overtime. What was kind of the moment for you that you were like, oh my God, I think the Chiefs are about to lose the Super Bowl?
It was the beginning of the second half. That was where I was like, okay, they're down 10 points. They've been here before. How are they going to adjust? And then they have the pitch that does not get caught and it gets dropped. And I'm just like, I don't know if they got it. I don't know. And then obviously Mahomes threw the pick, and I'm sitting there. I'm like, yeah, I really don't know what they're going to be able to do. The 49ers were playing, their defense was playing with such fire and such energy, and they were running all over the place. And they were, honestly, it felt like even when you watch like all of the mic'd up stuff after the franchise episode that dropped. When was this episode going to be released? Because it was a Tuesday. It was Tuesday.
It was.
Yeah. It was released on Tuesday. I finished watching that, and Patrick is talking on the sideline. They have more energy than we do. We got to bring the energy up, and it felt like for the first 1 quarter, 2 quarters and a half, 2.5 quarters, that the offense just did not know what to do. They couldn't really figure it out, and so that first drive after half is where my heart rate was at its, maybe not at its highest, but it was starting to come down, because I was starting to feel like, I don't really know. I do think that the moment that it got its highest was the last drive before overtime.
Sure.
And
third and 2 at the 2-minute warning. Yeah.
And it wasn't even the fourth down in overtime. It was there's a minute 53 left. The Chiefs get the ball back. What's going to happen here? Are they going to go score a touchdown? Are they going to, I don't know, not be able to get it? But that was more of the excitement. And if my heart rate being high for maybe them losing would have been that 2-minute warning. That's really where it came down to. Like, what's going to happen on this 3rd and 4? This is the game. It's right here. It comes down to this actual play. So I think for everyone, that moment is where your heart rate's the highest, because you're worried about what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And then it switches and my heart rate's high because I know what's going to happen.
Right.
That's
Isn't it
The
crazy?
It's a good line, Dan.
Yeah.
So, Dan, you mentioned this kind of already a little bit, talking a little bit about Steve Spagnuolo's game plan. And I would love for you to expound on that, because, I mean, you win back-to-back Super Bowls, you flex a little bit online, and, the fan bases love to talk, right? Like the Ravens fans are like, oh, you're so lucky that we abandoned the run, and Niners fans, it's the same thing. It's like, oh, you're so lucky we didn't get our passing offense going. And it's like, okay, but I think Steve Spagnuolo, future Hall of Fame defensive coordinator, had a little bit to do with that. Like, I don't think you guys just forgot that you were the best rushing team in the NFL, or you forgot that Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel and George Kittle exist, right? Like, talk about, I mean, what is it about what Steve Spagnuolo did in the AFC Championship game in the Super Bowl that caused teams to get away from what they do best.
Well, I think that against the Ravens, it was Patrick Mahomes. It was, we're going to score on our first two possessions, and we are going to
Sure.
force you to be to throw the football, honestly, because they were able to run the ball in
Right.
those limited times they did. But that's what inexperience does. That's what
Right.
happened in the multiple playoff appearances that Patrick Mahomes starts scoring and teams are like, oh
Panic.
shit, what do we
Yeah.
do? We have to keep up. We have to make sure we keep pace. And it's the mind game, and it's just the simple fact that once Patrick Mahomes starts scoring points, you get in your own head about your own game plan and you leave everything else behind. Now, I don't know what the Baltimore Ravens game plan was outside of, we are going to have Lamar Jackson win this football game. But what they did so well in that game was, again, forcing Lamar Jackson to throw the ball outside the numbers so
Right.
many different times and doing it differently with great coverage or with pressure. And when you force a quarterback who, and I like Lamar a lot, I think he's gotten a lot better as a passer in general since he became into the league. But the one place that he does struggle is throwing the ball down the field outside the numbers. And multiple times we saw him have to throw it to, I would say, 25, 75 balls, because there's almost no shot those guys are going to go get that football. And it was just so quick, and there was free pressures and free releases and many different things that they changed. Obviously, one broken play nearly cost them a touchdown, and then L'Jarius Sneed makes the most amazing play he maybe ever makes in the Super Bowl, or in the postseason, excuse me. So that's really what that was. It was the offense triggering the Ravens to play into exactly what the Chiefs defense does well, which is generate pressure and force you into making tough decisions and then creating turnovers in that game, which they hadn't typically done. And then in the Super Bowl, it was the 49ers came out and they ran the ball really well their first drive, and the Chiefs were playing zone. And Brock Purdy was like, you guys, this is exactly what I want you to do. And Steve's like, fine. Like near the end of the first quarter, into the second quarter, he's like, fine, you're tearing up our zone. So we have the skill set and the playmakers to say, just play press man coverage, play man coverage and beat your guys. And then you started to see Brock was more uncomfortable. He's not very comfortable throwing into tight windows consistently. It's not the area that he
never has to
in.
do it. So,
No, it's not why he was drafted. I mean, obviously
Right.
he being the last pick, but what we're seeing the success is, it's timing. It's those play action passes where you have the dig route opening over the middle of the field. It's a time that he's throwing it right to a spot on the field. He doesn't have to think. I'm going to look at that spot with this play action going through, and if the hole is still there, I'm pulling it and I'm throwing it immediately to a spot. He's never even looking at the receiver, by the way. That's not how that works. It's all based off of timing, especially against zone. So when it's man coverage and you can throw the timing off like the Chiefs corners were able to do so many times, you saw a couple of clutches because he's having to now read the play out a little bit longer than he wants to get through. Okay, I need to go over here. I need to go over here. I need to get here, or I need to just rip this. And that's just not his game. So the adjustment was just play man coverage, but continue to trigger on the run quickly, get downhill. And obviously some of the performances from guys like Mike Pennell and Mike Dana, obviously Chris Jones was incredible, not getting sacked, but so impactful. Leo Chanel, there was so many routine, I won't say routine, but playmakers from this game that were just rotational guys that were making huge football plays. So when you have that culminating in everyone just buying into what Steve Spagnuolo is selling, and then I think my favorite thing from the entire time was right after they scored their first touchdown, everyone gets in that huddle and Steve Spagnuolo is like, they had to do a trick play to score a touchdown.
Yeah.
That's how good you guys are playing. And we saw that map out the rest of the game. And it was incredible to watch that team never get down on themselves, that those players just continue to battle and go out there and say, I don't care, Debo, Brandon Ayuk, we're going to man you up and we'll force Juwan Jennings to make some plays, who did. He made some really good plays in that game. But if it's down to Juwan Jennings beating your defense, you put your hands up and say, okay, we're fine with that.
What's a play or a player or a coach that we're not talking about enough? We've had plenty of time to digest this and give flowers to all the guys. I mean, we're back-to-back Super Bowl champion, defending champs, back-to-back going for the three-peat. But who is there, a player or a coach that you feel like somehow over the last month is still not getting the attention that they deserve?
There's two guys that I'm going to mention, and one of them is someone who a lot of people wanted fired over the past couple of seasons, and it's Dave Tobe, because they won that football game. Special teams, the fumble essentially, that was all. It was obviously it wasn't a great punt. It was a little bit hanging up there, but we saw everyone jump on that. Those are practicing things that you practice all the time, and it happened to bounce their way that time. And then you have obviously Harrison Butker, the holds. I think that what they were able to do with getting Butker and Tommy Townsend down on the right path with the holds, that attributes to Dave Tobe, like their punt coverage, all the little things,
blocked extra point
teams. Exactly. All of those little things culminated into the Chiefs being able to come back in this football game in the Super Bowl and win. And obviously Harrison Butker was nails all year long. Like, he never really missed anything. I never went back there and like for a 50+ yard field goal and said, yeah, he might miss this. I never once thought that. And when you have something like that, it makes everyone play a little bit looser. So I really think that Dave Tobe is someone who deserves more credit. And when you win a game based off of 3 or 4 plays and special teams that allow your offense and defense to continue to do what they do best, you give them some flowers. And then Justin Reed, when Brandon Cook went down, I mean, you've got Shamari Connor, you've got Mike Edwards, who hasn't been in the defense very long, who have to come in and be real role players. And the ability to let a guy like Shamari Connor, who's like this slot safety hybrid, much like Brian Cook was when he came out, it's hard when you're learning a defense and now you're having more thrust upon you. And as Justin Reed, who has gotten better and better, his time in Kansas City, especially in the postseason, he comes and he makes huge plays, whether it's blitzing, whether it's in coverage. He's really communicating well with everyone in the secondary. He's become such a vital cog in this whole defense. And people are talking right now on Twitter. I guess Twitter's not real place, guys, about cutting Justin Reed to save some cap space. You can save some cap space by extending a really good young safety in your defense who's been important for 2 Super Bowl victories in Justin Reed. So you can create cap space, but also keep, again, a young player. And that makes a lot of sense if they want to create cap space. But I also think he's well deserving of an extension. So those are 2 guys that I really think deserve more flowers than they're getting, because their names and specifically what they're asked to do aren't necessarily in the limelight. Obviously, Reed being more of a glue secondary member, whether it's being a box safety, whether it's coming down and blitzing, whether it's covering a tight end or just fitting in the run game. You don't really see his name a ton in the box score, but what he does is so important. And obviously Tobe this year, I think their special teams were top 5 in the NFL, if I'm not mistaken. So bouncing back from I would say some miscues a couple seasons ago, they've been really solid the past couple of years.
Yeah, both 2 excellent polls. I do think that you're right that it seems like the fan base is really who you're talking to about them not getting enough love, sure. Just because both of those guys get a lot of unneeded hate in Twitter world. So
2 straight postseasons that Dave Tobe has been, just knocking it out of the park.
Yes, absolutely. Obviously, everyone remembers all the big moments from the 2022 playoff run that were special teams moments. So let's zoom out a little bit. And now when you think back to the 2023 Chiefs in a couple years, what do you think your lasting impression is going to be about this team? Is it the adversity that they overcame? Is it, just like what's the story that you think is going to stick with you the longest about this team?
How they fought it. This team, when you look back and you look through the entire franchise, like episodes, you see and you listen to the press conferences, like they're doing it in practice. We just got to get out of our own way, stuff like that. They knew it was there. They knew it was there Obviously, the defense had been keeping them in football games, but when you have the belief in yourself and the will to win football games, it shows in so many different ways that you don't really expect. And going back to the drawing board in week 16 after that loss, like you guys mentioned, that is maybe one of the moments that will always stick in my head because it did feel like for the longest portion of this season, they were just banging their heads against the wall and then banging their head against the wall and trying to do the same thing over and over and over again. And it wasn't working. And then finally, they got past it and they fought through. And the way that they got through the postseason with the toughest stretch ever recorded in DVOA history.
Yep.
That is, it just shows you that it doesn't, that it really, the regular season doesn't matter for this team. If you get to the dance, they could have been a 6 seed. They could have been just eking into the postseason. If the same thing happens, just the seeds were different, I don't think it would have mattered. And that speaks to the leadership, the drive, and honestly the basics of football and how they went after it, they went about it, and nothing that happened throughout the season made them lose confidence in themselves. And that's hard to do, especially when you play as much football over the last 5 seasons.
Yeah.
More football than any team has maybe ever played.
Yep.
That says something. So the fight and obviously the adversity they faced is always going to be that way. But I just keep thinking back to that, them going back to the drawing board in week 16 and not saying it's too late in the season for us to fix this. They did it.
Yeah, they were unbelievable Warriors. It is crazy thinking back on that. So then we'll transition a little bit and look forward. At this moment in time, not knowing what's going to be the end plan with L'Jarius Sneed, not knowing if the Chiefs are going to pick up Hollywood Brown, just kind of where we are tonight on March 13th. How are you feeling about the three-peat chances this moment? Like, are you feeling pretty good about where the Chiefs are at moving forward? You know, where's your temperature check look like moving forward?
I think I'm pretty okay right now. Obviously, they have quite a few free agents that they have to fill out a roster still, so that's going to happen. I'm not sure who's going to join, who's not going to. Obviously, the draft's still to come, but the simple fact for me is that I was reflecting after the Super Bowl, and I said the same thing. Originally, right after the Super Bowl, I said L'Jarius Sneed is a must resign over Chris Jones. Okay. A couple weeks after that, I'm reevaluating, and I think today's NFL, more than anything, as good as the cornerbacks play and have played last season, it's more volatile than a dominant defensive line pressure player.
Right.
Now, yes, and I think that this year specifically, we're seeing the dichotomy of that. The offenses around the league struggled a little bit, and it was defenses finally saying, well, we're just going to put tops on it, and you're not going to be able to throw the ball down the field, so you're going to have to figure out different ways to move the ball down the field. And that's not a cornerback specific thing. Okay. I love L'Jarius Sneed. I'm never going to say anything bad against him. I think he's a fantastic player. I think he should have been a first-team All-Pro. And I would love to have him back in Kansas City going forward. I do think the reality of the situation, though, dictates that the way you get pressure puts less pressure on your cornerbacks. You've got Trent McDuffie. There was talk coming into this season out of training camp that Najee Johnson was going to be the starter with Trent McDuffie and L'Jarius Sneed in those nickel packages. Now, obviously, with the injury, there was no way to tell for sure. But I'm not of the opinion that Josh Williams and Jalen Watson are good enough to put on the outside in those nickel sets if you don't have L'Jarius Sneed. So if he's not in Kansas City, I think you need to address the position. Or if Najee Johnson is going to be that starter, we have to see that baseline there. So, excuse me, there's multiple places. Again, when you don't have Sneed, That's two starters on the outside now, by the way, in nickel, where you don't have L'Jarius Sneed. You have Watson and Williams, or Najee Johnson and Williams, and however that works. And I'm not willing myself, this is my own opinion, to say 2 7th-round picks and a 4th-round pick, you guys will figure it out.
Sure.
I would like more talent to be there. So with all that said, Chris Jones is the Patrick Mahomes of the defense. Getting him signed, regardless, I know some people are hesitant about the money, but I'll say this. Chris Jones is rare. He is a rare player. Much like Aaron Donald, they dominate games. They can take over football games. And Chris Jones saved 3 separate touchdowns by creating pressure himself in that football game. He saved 3 of them. The one that people don't forget was a leaker on the left side to Christian McCaffrey, where he's wide open with a blocker in front of him, and there is not one person out that way. But what they remember is Leo Chanel getting that tackle for loss because Brock Purdy checked it down to, I believe it was Juwan Jennings. But if you look on the left side of that play, it's just Christian McCaffrey and there's nobody in front of him. If Brock Purdy can get down to his check down, which he's good at doing, there is no telling what happens there. But Chris Jones getting pressure in the backfield, forcing a check down, and then a tackle for loss, that changes the dynamic of the entire football game. So he had to have been the guy they signed. It felt like there was much more optimism this time around. Obviously, they got the deal done, but you start with Patrick Mahomes on the offensive side, you start with Chris Jones on the defensive side, and you work around it. And I'm pretty comfortable with where they're going to be come regular season.
Well, let's turn to that a little bit, and obviously looking forward to be able to three-peat, which no NFL team has ever done. You've got to fill some holes, and one way to do that is through free agency. We're recording this on Wednesday night. It's about 9:30 Arrowhead time when we're recording this. So if any news drops subsequent to this, draw your own conclusions. But is there anybody that, obviously the Chiefs have been pretty quiet so far. Has there been anybody that's gone in the first 2 days of free agency, 3 days now, I guess, since the legal tampering period opened, and today's the first day officially of the new league year? Has there been a player that has signed a free agency that you thought, gosh, I wish the Chiefs had been in on that player at that price?
That the last part's really key, right?
Sure, of course it is. That makes all the difference, right?
Yeah. Oh man.
And the answer might be no. I mean, the answer might be no.
I think it might actually be no for me. Like there were some players. I mean, okay, there's one. It's Willie Gay. It's Willie Gay.
1-year
Willie
deal.
Gay and Nick Allegretti. Those two guys. I would have still
They're
brought Nick
sentimental
Allegretti back on that. Nick Allegretti was my very first draft hit. He was the guy I called the Chiefs drafting on day 3, and I loved what he brought, and we're seeing exactly why. He's the epitome of I'm going to just do what I do best, and I'm going to come in, I'm going to do whatever is asked of me, never complain. Obviously, playing in the Super Bowl with a torn ligament in his arm, just
unbelievable.
The epitome of a team guy, and I love him. I would have brought him back. I would have brought Willie Gay back for a 1 year of $5 million, but we're seeing around the league, teams were a little hesitant, I think, with some of the injury stuff and his past and off-field stuff, and maybe Kansas City feels very good about Cam Jones, and that's why Willie Gay's not in Kansas City anymore. And obviously, if you watched the last game of the season against the Chargers, you could see why they'd be very excited about Cam Jones. He was everywhere. For those who don't know, he was the linebacker that they brought in, I believe, as a UDFA out of Indiana last year. He was really good for the Chiefs in week 18, actually. So he's probably their, I would imagine, the Willie Gay replacement if he's healthy, ready to go. One of the reasons he didn't play is because he got hurt in the last game too. So that's somebody that I would have loved to have back, because again, those two guys are like glue guys. The epitome of teams are finding those guys, and obviously no team's going to be the same. You win Super Bowls, players go and they get paid. I am so happy that Nick Allegretti got paid. He's going to go be a starter, and that makes my heart happy. Like it really does. Like I can't wait to see what he does. And that's life-changing money for a guy who was drafted on day 3. It just is. So good for him. And again, I'm looking back at the free agents. that's like those are the only two guys, and they're home guys. And you
Right.
look around at specifically the wide receivers that got
Mhm.
paid. Like, yeah, I'm good. I'm real good. And the one guy I would have liked to see maybe at a lower price was Jonah Williams, who just signed with the Arizona Cardinals. Um, I like what I think he could be a right tackle, left tackle doesn't really matter to me. But he signed for 15 mil a year, which I'm just like, okay, that's fine, Arizona. You got money, you do that.
So the only new player that the Chiefs have brought in that wasn't one of their own guys so far is Irv Smith Jr., the tight end, former Bengal, former Viking. What have you had a chance to watch any tape on him yet, or I mean, any opinion on Irv Smith Jr.? Obviously, a guy who's had some trouble staying healthy, but the tape that he has put out there, what do you think of it?
He's a he's a good, I'll just say this, he's a good pass catcher. He's not overly dynamic. He's less athletic on field than you'd like him to be. There was if you guys you guys play fantasy, there was a
Yes.
large amount of people that thought Irv Smith Jr. was going to be the guy.
Including me.
Including me. Yes,
Dude,
like,
Austin, I owned him for 4 years in our dynasty league. Like
I mean,
I'm a
yeah,
big Irv Smith guy.
yeah,
So
me
yeah,
too.
he's just not an overly dynamic player. Now, what we're seeing is the Chiefs value that 13 personnel. And
Sure.
Jody Fortson is a free agent who I think that they are trying still to bring back. We know Blake Bell is done.
Good.
He's gone. He's not coming back. But that also kind of shows you that, well, Blake Bell was like that blocking tight end, right? Does that mean that Noah Gray is going to be your blocking tight end now? Because if it is, the Chiefs might be in a little bit of trouble. Because I don't think Irv Smith is a guy that you trust as a blocking tight end per se. But again, 13 personnel. What it does is it adds dynamicism to a position last year that was Blake Bell. So you have that going for you. He's a guy who also can, elevate, go catch the football in the red zone, which is something the Chiefs will need, especially going forward if this is, the outside position receiver as it looks right now, which I don't expect it to look that way when it comes to the season, training camp, stuff like that. So he definitely adds something. He also reduced down like we saw Blake Bell in the Super Bowl and the playoffs where he's like an H back where he's in the backfield and he's
Right.
running routes or he's getting a better blocking angle because of where he's lined up. So that's something else as well. So he's not going to overly, I don't think he's going to challenge, Noah Gray for playing time. I just think that at the end of the day, he might even, be released before the season's over. I wouldn't be surprised if that happens, if they bring somebody else in and he just gets beat out.
You mentioned the wide receiver market earlier. Is that where you would kind of identify the worst overpays? I mean, specifically, I want to ask about Calvin Ridley with the 4-year, $92 million deal, 50 of which is guaranteed to the Titans, that apparently swooped in at the last second to outbid the Jags for him. Kind of seemed to me like the Titans were they had a lot of money. They had like 75 million under the cap when the day started. And I kind of feel like they just decided to go out and troll a division rival and steal someone from them. Is there anyone that you would identify as a bigger overpay, I guess I should say, than Calvin Ridley?
I don't think so. And again, Calvin Ridley has the skill set to
Sure.
actually be a good football player. So I don't mind the move for Tennessee. Obviously, the money is the one thing that
Yes.
I mind. And he's never going to say no to money. So
No.
and he
shouldn't. Yeah.
No, it's just so much. It's so much money. And this is one of those, magic box kind of thing or mystery box kind of things because he wasn't bad last year. Don't get me wrong. He wasn't bad.
1,000
But he
yards,
was
8
not
touchdowns.
the player. He
Yep.
was not the player
Yep.
that he was in Atlanta. I don't think he was even close to it. I'll be very honest. And you're betting that him being with DeAndre Hopkins and Traylon Burks, who's now going to be out of the slot, which I really love, by the way. I
Yeah.
love what they did because it
Little
makes
fancy
him be a
tip.
slot. It makes him be a slot now, which is his position. He's
Yep.
not an outside guy.
Yep. You've
So
been preaching that.
this whole thing, it makes sense. Problem is that they don't have a quarterback. And I
No,
don't care how many Will Levis stands you guys are. The dude, unless he gets his feet out of the cement that he puts them in when he gets out of his drop, and starts seeing pressure and getting to his other receivers and not just throwing the ball down the field 1,000 times a game, it's not going to work out very well. But all the luck to him. I wish for the best because I never want guys to fail ever.
Sure.
So the money's a problem there, but there were just some other overpays, and while that's probably what the market dictates, I would
especially with the cap going up.
My biggest problem with this whole, it's what the market dictates, is this wide receiver class is loaded.
Yeah.
Why pay a Gabe Davis that
Right.
much money? And obviously the details of the contract, I believe it's maybe like a fancy 1-year contract at the end of the day where they have an out after the first year. But I mean, it's the Jags. Look at what they're doing.
It's also Gabe Davis, though. So, like,
Right.
I mean,
They should have a 0-year out with
Yeah.
Gabe Davis. They never should have signed him up in the first place.
fancy 1-year deal, but still,
I hate Gabe Davis.
as of Wednesday night, Dan, is there anybody still out there that you are particularly interested in, or that you hope the Chiefs make a run at signing?
Yeah, so I tweeted out earlier today, there's going to be 2 wide receivers specifically on the market that should be looking for the Juju contract. It's some form of the Juju contract in Hollywood Brown and now Mike Williams. Honestly, Mike Williams makes the most sense considering they do need a legit X receiver.
Right.
And
He's
if
a
they're
good
not
fit.
if they're not interested in putting Rashee Rice as an X, well, we can just slot Mike Williams in there and say, hey, go ahead, Rashee, you be the Z, and we'll just draft a receiver in the top 60 plus, and we'll say, well, you can take your time and develop. And at the end of the day, if Mike Williams decides that he's going to keep getting hurt when he leaves LA, well, there's nothing we can do about that. So it's it would be a 1-year prove it deal, and you figure it out. He's got time to get, both of these guys have more than enough time for a 1-year prove it deal to get paid. So that would be the ideal situation. Curtis Samuel, I have tweets from 2020, 2021 asking Curtis Samuel to be with Kansas City because his skill set would be so much fun.
It would be great.
This offense, there's so many different ways you can use him out of the backfield. He takes over the McCole Hardman role, and he can run better routes, things like that, and he tracks the ball better. He's just an overall upgrade at that gimmicky, do whatever you want him to position. I like those. I also think Tyron Smith would be fun. He might be more expensive. You're probably talking about 12, 13, $14 million for like another guy who's been hurt most of his career, specifically lately. DJ Humphries, who was released by the Arizona Cardinals coming off of an injury. You might be able to get him a little cheaper, actually quite a bit cheaper, I would think, coming off the injury. But there's a lot of guys in the free agent market that the Chiefs are just slow playing. They don't have a need to go out and really, make a huge impact. The safety market is also an area where you're going to be able
it's
to
crazy. We haven't hardly
value.
seen anybody sign there.
No, just a few guys. I mean, Xavier McKinney got the big contract with the Packers, but obviously Mike Edwards could come back. You could even bring a guy back like Kendall Fuller, who's played really good cornerback play, who's been a really good corner in the NFL.
Micah Hyde, maybe
he left Kansas City. I mean, sure.
Justin Simmons.
Justin Simmons would be hilarious.
Any one of the players that played against Kansas City that continued to lose against them would be the best thing in the world.
Really
I love it. After we took Drew Tranquil and took him to the mountaintop, it's like my new favorite thing. And I don't know if you guys have been keeping an eye on Twitter/X while we've been recording. Don't do it. But Drew Tranquil is out there actively recruiting Hollywood and Mike Williams to come to the Chiefs. He's just out there tweeting every free agent.
See red and think Super Bowls. I mean, that's what he said last
year. One of my favorite Chiefs.
He's awesome, right? Really, really likable, really passionate.
You just have to imagine that bringing in a guy like Justin Simmons, who's never been to the playoffs and beat the Chiefs once in his entire career as a Bronco, or Mike Williams, who has been to the playoffs, I guess, last year, but didn't play.
Technically,
because Brandon Staley got him hurt in that useless regular season finale. I mean, that would be fun.
I'm sure he would be highly motivated to play the Chargers twice a year, right? I mean, a lot of times the division rival signing in free agency is like the most predictable move because he's like, screw those guys. Like, I want to go get after them.
You get revenge and you win at the same time.
You do. That's true. And especially if you're coming to the Chiefs, if you're not going to a division rival that also sucks, then that helps. Dan, do you have many strong held opinions about Mekhi Becton? Do you feel like he's a guy that would excite you if you saw the Chiefs picked him up, the big left tackle, or I guess tackle? He's played around a little bit, but 6'7", 364, didn't really work out with the Jets, but has the frame. What do you think of him?
He's never been healthy.
Yeah.
He never once played a healthy season.
Yeah.
If the Chiefs signed him, I would be like, they're absolutely drafting a tackle in the first round.
Sure.
Sure.
I would
That's good.
it would almost guarantee it.
He
for
played
me.
16 games this year. I mean,
Yeah, well, he played.
We're gonna put quotations.
Yeah,
around
he
that.
appeared. He appeared.
Sure.
So
No,
it
that's
wouldn't.
fair.
I mean, I wouldn't be like super mad about it personally. It would
Okay.
just be more of.
But you're not like,
he's-
I hope they sign him.
Yeah, no,
Taylor
he's not a solution.
Taylor took him in our free agent draft that he took last week, so he's trying to manifest.
I'm trying to get
that
I'm
is
trying to
what-
get a win in
It's
that one,
completely
It's,
meaningless.
Get it.
There's nothing on the line, but if a player signs that we drafted, we get bragging rights. So far, we're 0 for.
I think
I took Fletcher Cox
for
with my
6.
last pick,
Yeah,
and then he retired
Yeah.
the next day. So that was
Sure.
that was disappointing. Would have been a great fit. Would have been fun, Fletcher. You can always walk that back. Let's spin this forward to the draft, and I know you have been obviously up to your neck in draft stuff for months now, and got your first opportunity to go to the NFL Combine, which is amazing.
Yes.
How was that?
Oh man, it was incredible. You know, unfortunately, RGR we don't get credentialed for it. We're not recognized it for whatever reason in the NFL eyes, but fantasy, outlets are allowed to go and
Sure,
get
yeah,
credentialed.
right, of
So,
course.
that makes a lot of sense to me. But I'm
Sure.
not here complaining about the fact that we can't get credentials to that stuff. But allowing for cover one got one credential, and I was fortunate enough to be the guy that got it, and
Awesome.
affording myself the opportunity to do that by being on the draft podcast over there that we just started a few months ago. Me and John are doing a great job. It's a lot of fun, and obviously getting to watch all these guys more closely now. And then going forward year round is going to be a new challenge to my life that I'm not sure I'm quite
Sure,
ready
of
for.
course.
But getting to watch these guys on the field in Indy, just first of all, they should never move it. It can't move.
Yeah.
I had one experience there, and it was perfect. It was
Right.
set up exactly how it needs to be. So please don't move the combine. Keep
Right.
it where it is. We don't want it to move. These guys, most of them are just so well ready for the moment, and it's insane how many people are there, how many different people talk to these players. Some of these people shouldn't be allowed in my opinion. Like there was a guy going around asking if he thinks birds are real.
Oh, no.
Like,
Oh yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
Oh no.
yeah, like come on.
Turning the combine into Super Bowl media night, like
Making it a joke.
It was the same guy that was asking weird stuff. At
Of course it was. Yeah,
I was just like, can
Come
we
on.
get this guy
Is he not
out
on
of
the
here?
list?
yeah.
I don't know.
Come on, get out of here.
But genuinely, it was one of the most incredible experiences. And I got there on Wednesday, actually Thursday. It would have been Thursday morning at midnight. And later that morning, when I first set foot in there, I texted my wife and I said, I'm making this a yearly thing, so you better figure
Awesome.
out work. Like I'm not gonna not be here
That's great.
if I can make it happen. So it was great, and just hopefully I am afforded the same opportunity going forward, because it was just so unique and so great and worth all of the non-sleeping that I did.
Was there anybody, we'll get into the class broadly here in a second, but was there anybody that, obviously being there in person is a little bit different. We can watch these guys on TV. We can put on the tape. We can even look at, pictures of these guys, behind a podium. But was there anybody that really like stood out to you in person where you're like, whoa, this guy has a presence, whether it be like physically or just, I know you made it out to some of the pressers and some of the media sessions. Anybody that really just kind of jumped out, either as a fit for the Chiefs or just generally?
I mean, I wish he would fall that far, but Amarius Mims, the tackle out of Georgia, was just not just an menacingly huge person. Like he is humongous, and I'm a big guy. I'm 6'5", 270. He is huge, and I'm just like, my God, how are you that big and you move so well? It doesn't make sense. And then you listen to him talk, and he's charismatic. He was having a good time. He was like, in that spotlight, he knew this is, what I'm supposed to do. He really, it grabbed me. It was just, he was so comfortable, smooth speaking, knew exactly how to really talk, didn't stumble over his words. Like he really impressed me. Blake Corum, running back out of Michigan, was already a favorite of mine, but these guys out of Michigan are so well spoken. Jim Harbaugh did a fantastic job preparing them for their jobs in the NFL, and you can tell all of that. So all the Michigan guys were really good at just speaking and being present and talking about their teammates and all of that fun stuff, the things that really do matter. I thought I got a little bit of the Caleb Williams interview. I couldn't get close because it was like legitimately the entire crowd was like talking, wanting to talk to him. But okay, he was fine. I'm more like, I was really interested at seeing some of the the guy like Darius Robinson out of Mizzou. He looked a tad uncomfortable, but that's because I think he's still trying to figure out what teams want him to do, play tackle or play defensive. And there was just so many other players. I thought Xavier Worthy, wide receiver out of Texas, was well spoken, ready for the interview process as well. Obviously, he looked just about as small as you figured with him when he measured in at 5'11" and 165 pounds. But
fast.
Yeah, real. I mean, obviously, he just looks fast. Even with his hair, the dude just looks super fast. So like I said, most of them were really well spoken. Talise Fuaga, another guy who really impressed me, Oregon State right tackle. A lot of people think he's going to play guard at the next level. I would still play him at tackle. I have no problems with him at that spot myself. But just so many things I couldn't experience and talk and see and listen to all the people that I wanted to, but those are the guys off the top of my head that really did a nice job of answering questions, being in the moment and having fun with it too, because outside of the guy asking dumb questions, there's still some questions that you can have fun with and answer in a fun loving way, and it was really cool to see that.
I guess taking a step back, sort of more at a bird's eye view level, what are kind of the positional strengths of this 2024 draft class?
Yeah, so everyone knows that the wide receiver and tackle class is hugely deep.
Yeah.
It's really, really good. It's deep. I think that both could set records in the first round for amount of players drafted. I'm starting to lean more towards tackles having more selected in the first round than ever in history. I think that might actually happen.
What is the record for tackles in the first round? Do you know
off the top of your head? I believe it's 7.
Wow.
6 or 7.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, almost a third of the first round, almost a quarter of the round. Yeah. So
it's insane. I also really like the corner class. I think it's a really good corner class. If it wasn't as good of a wide receiver and tackle class, we'd be talking more about the corner, because right after the top 10, I don't know if we'll see a defensive player selected in the top 10. I think it might be quarterbacks, wide receivers, and tackles. That's how good it is. And I'm still a big believer in this corner class, which again, I mean, if I'm not trying to say it's going to happen, but if L'Jarius Sneed is not in Kansas City, that's going to push those corners down the board. That could be a spot where you're like, we really like our spot here. This is the corner falling to us. Maybe the Chiefs draft a corner there at 32 instead of, a wide receiver or a tackle. But those are the two spots, really the three spots that stick out. I still like the quarterback class too. I think that I don't think it's just Caleb Williams or bust. I think that there's a lot of good players, even into the Spencer Rattlers, who I'm a fan of myself. I think he's matured a lot since his time at Oklahoma, and we're seeing a completely different person from that guy. I think he's a good player. There's Michael Pratt out of Tulane. I think is a good NFL, going to be a good NFL, maybe backup, but still, when you have competent backup play, that's huge, especially for guys coming out of Tulane who, let's face it, don't get the experience of playing in some of the big games that a lot of these quarterbacks do. So I think it's a good quarterback class at the top and in the middle, maybe not so much at the back end, but those are the positions that I think that are really, really good. Underrated one is defensive tackle. There's a ton of talent at defensive tackle in this class. It's deep, and there's a lot of different styles for different defenses. So that's something that I found out doing my defensive tackle watch. I think I did 12 or 13 guys this last go around.
Oh wow, nice.
They're good.
Let's talk about the wide receivers, because obviously this class has gotten a ton of hype. Obviously there's kind of the big three, maybe a big one, and then a big two, but three guys that we expect to go in the top 10, which is out of range for the Chiefs. But if you had to guess, this is the best wide receiver class since when? I mean, what class does this kind of compare to?
I would think the 2014 class where you
Okay.
had that was, historically one of the best ever. This might end up being the best wide receiver class ever. Obviously I haven't been scouting as long as 2014,
Sure, right.
so I don't remember all the guys off the top of my head.
I can tell you.
It was please go for
Sammy
it.
Watkins was 4th. Mike Evans was 7th.
Odell was in that class, right?
was 12th. And Brandon Cooks was 20th.
I mean,
and at the end of the
pretty good
first
class.
round, Kelvin Benjamin was in there. But I mean, yeah, those guys were, very, very good at the top of that draft.
And all really good as rookies too. That was kind of before, that was back in the day when people were like, wide receivers need a couple years. And
I mean, Odell has one of the best rookie, and Devontae Adams was a later second-round pick.
That's right. Devontae was a second-round pick. I mean, yeah, that was
Allen Robinson,
crazy,
Jarvis Landry. Good depth there.
It was a stacked class, so I think you can put this one up with it. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of first-round wide receivers drafted. I only have 3 first-round greats.
Okay.
Because
and I assume it's the three that we would expect.
Yeah,
Rome. Love Rome. Obviously Marvin, and your third one would be
Neighbors.
Neighbors. Yeah. Sure. That makes sense. Who's your best fit for the Chiefs? Who do you like? Who would really excite you to see the Chiefs pick up in this wide receiver class specifically?
So again, if we're going down the path of the Chiefs want that X receiver, I'm going to use 2 different veins here because I think it's important that we acknowledge that there are 2 paths for Rashee Rice to go into. If the Chiefs want him to be the same player that he was and used sparingly on the outside with the routes, but still an explosive yak player, the Chiefs need an X receiver. They need someone to do that. And I know that this is not going to be the favorite of everyone in Chiefs Kingdom, but I'm very high on Keon Coleman. I still believe that he has the tools to be an X receiver in the NFL, and then an underrated guy at that position would be Xavier Legette out of South Carolina, and which would be different for the Chiefs specifically because he did not do anything until his very last season in college, which there's a multitude of reasons as to why, but at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. It just matters what you do. He had the most yards in college football last year against man coverage. He led college football in yards against man coverage last year. So those 2 guys are the bigger bodies that I believe can be an X receiver. Keon's going to come out and be that now. He can be your X receiver. Xavier will still have to learn more about the hand usage in your stem, in your release, being able to get off of physical press, because that's still a learning process for him. He's more of, I'm going to out athlete you. If you miss with your jam, I'm running by you, because he's 4.39 speed. He has that. And that's something that you can't teach. And Keon, he plays a lot faster than his 40 time is. We all kind of got the full experience of Keon Coleman, where his buddy that everyone expected to be a tight end ran a faster 40 than he did with Johnny Wilson, which should kind of tell you maybe the 40 isn't the best way to view speed. It's on field speed. And he was in, I believe, top 3 on field speed in every single drill that they did at the combine, Keon Coleman, that is. So plays a lot faster than his 40. Big physical guy, can make all the different catches, and he's got really good footwork. People forget he was a punt returner and a really good punt returner, and he was honestly a better receiver at Michigan State than he was asked to be at Florida State. So I still think that he is a very good fit if they're looking for an X. Now, if they want to make Rashee Rice the number 1 receiver. He's going to run all the different routes, do a lot more on the outside, running a vertical route tree as well. Then Xavier Worthy makes a ton of sense. I'm a big Xavier Worthy fan.
Okay.
I think he's a lot more than just a speed guy. And I know people will get scared off by the weight. If you go and watch the film room I did on Xavier Worthy, it shows multitude of things. There's the very second clip that I show you is him moving, turning, and spinning around a cornerback all in one route. He moves this guy all over the place. So his manipulation skills are there. He has nuance to his routes. Texas didn't ask him to do a ton of different routes. Not his fault. We have to consider usage when we're talking about players. Like, we have to look at what they're asked to do. He wasn't asked to do a ton, but when you break down the individual routes that he was asked, you can see that he has more to him as a route runner, because he's a good route runner and he adds nuance. Obviously, the speed is there. He's physical too. There's, I think, 3 different plays that I have where he runs through contact and doesn't avoid contact. He runs through, he bounces off, and he keeps going. He's a good short area player. He's not Tyreek Hill in that
Nobody
regard,
is.
but he's better than McCole Hardman in moving his feet. He's better at that. And that's something that people want to say. He's McCole Hardman. No, he's not. He runs better routes, and he's a better make you miss after the fact player. And the only thing that you're really worried about are his drops, the drop concerns with him, which to me
That's never
are
been a
not
big deal for the Chiefs.
yeah, right. They've never had to worry about that before, so that won't be an issue. So it doesn't look technique related to me. But these are guys in the first round, at the end of the first round, that I think would be fits. I think Troy Franklin too. I did a film review on him on the RJR Football channel as well, and I know that there's a name that I'm leaving out, but
Adonai Mitchell.
Yes, I like Adonai. I would like him in the second round, but he's probably not going to be in the second round. And I just have more questions about his game is all. So we'll get into it far more. If you guys want, you can always hit me up on Twitter about questions you have. I've already done
In Harm's Way 19. We haven't plugged that. In Harm's Way
No, we
19
haven't.
on Twitter.
I think I've watched 25 receivers already this cycle. So I have lots of different opinions on guys. So if you have any questions, again, at In Harm's Way 19, I'm always available.
Real quick, Dan, before we let you go with our final question, 2 of the Chiefs' division quote unquote rivals need a quarterback, and they obviously are not picking, in the top 5, either of them. Are there quarterbacks, just knowing what you know? And obviously, I know, I don't know what you were hearing, if you were hearing anything at the combine. A lot of whispers obviously going on there, a lot of league sources passing through the combine, obviously. But is there anybody that we as Chiefs fans should be worried about the Las Vegas Raiders or the Denver Broncos selecting in the 2024 draft? And I guess I'm baking into that question the possibility of them moving up. Although obviously they're going to be limited in how far they can go up and who they potentially could grab.
So there's the only guy that I think one of them will move up for, because I don't think the Raiders are going to be moving up to draft a quarterback. I think that they are pretty happy with Gardner Minshew, which is pretty interesting.
Sure.
Which, I mean, fine. But the fact that they brought him in when they have Aiden O'Connell suggests bridge quarterback.
Yeah.
So
I agree.
second round, you're looking at maybe they're going after Spencer Rattler. That would be what I would say. And obviously I have no sources to confirm that. But I do know that Sean Payton loves JJ McCarthy. I know that. So if there was a guy that I think that they could get, that they'd have to trade up in front of the Minnesota Vikings,
right?
Because the Vikings apparently are drafting JJ McCarthy, and everyone knows it except the Vikings. So that's the thing about this stuff. As soon as Xavier Worthy ran the 4-2-1, everyone mocked him to the Chiefs, and we're seeing a lot of people mock the Vikings trading up to get JJ McCarthy. Maybe that doesn't happen. I don't know. Hell, maybe JJ McCarthy gets drafted at 5. Not with the Chargers, but someone trades up from 10 to 5, because I think the Chargers are going to trade down to get JJ McCarthy, or the Giants take him at 6.
Right.
I don't know what's going to happen, but the thing is that I do believe the Broncos would be, if he started to fall far enough, they would be very motivated to go draft JJ McCarthy.
Would that worry you at all? What I know, JJ is obviously a sort of a little bit of a controversial review on film, and people have kind of different opinions about him because Michigan didn't ask him to do very much. I mean, I've heard obviously all the off-field stuff, the interviews, the tape, team meetings and everything like that, he's knocking it out of the park. But would that concern you at all? A guy like JJ going to the Broncos?
No. And it's not because I don't like JJ. I love JJ. I think he's a fantastic person. Young, he's 20 years old.
Yeah.
He's not going to turn 21 until January, I think.
It's crazy.
And that's insane. But it's the Broncos. It's not.
Yeah.
He's not Patrick Mahomes. Like,
right
at the end of the day, I'm gonna take Steve Spagnuolo, who's gonna be apparently coaching in Kansas City as a defense coordinator forever, to beat JJ McCarthy. And I don't know, guys. I liked Sean Payton. I don't know that he's the guy.
Yeah,
I don't know that he's
lost his fastball a little bit, right? He's washed a little bit.
And some of it comes down to the quarterback. Obviously, Russell Wilson was somebody that he had to make work. And the only way he could make it work is what we saw last year. And it wasn't great. So we'll see what happens going forward. But if he does get JJ, we'll probably see more of what we saw in New Orleans with an actual good offense. But again, I'm not super worried about him coming in and being a threat to Patrick Mahomes. They play in the same division as Justin Herbert, and it hasn't really mattered. So no. I'm not that worried.
All right, Dan, last question. It's April 25th with the 32nd pick in the 2024 NFL draft. The Kansas City Chiefs select
Georgia wide receiver Ladd McConkey.
Woo!